Good evening, everyone. I call the meeting to order for January 17 and the specially called meeting for January 17 as well. Would you all stand for the pledge?
Yes. Hand over your heart. Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Director Denner.
Here.
Director Gray.
Here and under the just cause provision of the Brown Act, I have a contagious illness that prevents me from attending in person, and I do not have anybody in the room with me 18 years or older.
Director O'Brien. Here. Vice Chair Avila.
Here.
And Chair Freeman.
Here. Agenda review, are there any changes?
Chair, staff has no changes. I would note that we did open a special meeting this evening, which is a closed session item. So when we get to the closed session item after the open session, we'll have to take public statements on both the regular meeting closed session item and the special meeting closed session item.
And that's why I opened it
Yes.
for both.
And staff has no recommended changes to the end from staff.
Item 4 is public statement, items not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience, public audience, that has an item they would like to address that is not on the agenda?
Yes. I'm going to bring
Yes,
a
sir.
proposal.
Come on up.
Hello. I'm doing more proposal for a community garden at Houghton Stryver Park on Township. There's a location that the grass doesn't grow good there. It used to be a ball field. And I was wondering what measures we can take to put a community garden in this location.
Extra Strother.
It's by Valley View, just south of Valley View.
At Horton Park?
Houghton, yeah.
Oh, not Strother. Okay,
Yeah, there's baseball fields right next door.
yes.
So what measures would we need to do to put a community garden in this location?
Since it's not on the agenda, we can't take any action, but we'll can refer it if you'll meet with the general manager.
Yeah, Chair and Board of Directors, two thoughts. One, regarding follow-up, we can meet with the gentleman and see what the plan is.
Sure.
So that's with the staff folks here.
Okay.
So if you could leave your name and number, we'll get a hold of you to get it through. My other thought is the community's kind of rallied around the community garden that's behind the Adventist church. So we already have a community garden in town, and we've
Right.
kind of said that's the spot for the community garden in the community. So.
By the Adventist Church.
Yeah, there's an existing community garden behind the Adventist church, behind Sinaloa Middle School. So that's the spot that's already set up as a community garden in town. So if you wanted to latch on to kind of what they got going on, you could call the
I understand.
organizers of that.
It's the opposite side of town as well.
Yeah.
They're also building a lot more, there's a huge
Understood.
building on
Yeah.
Tapo Street right there. And I live in the Texas track, so it's like,
Understood.
what do we
I
do?
live in the Texas track too, and if
Thank
you
you.
meet with staff, what I would like to know is if it was a request for the park district to not just use the land but run it, or if there's a community group that's asking to use the land and they would run it. I would like to know
That
about
could be more of
that.
the way. We would, sublease the land or something, how would this work? So who would I speak to again?
If you could leave your name and number with Zach,
Okay.
we'll get a hold of you and we can
Okay.
get together and talk it through.
Great, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other one in the audience? Is there anyone on Zoom that wants to address an item that is not on the agenda? Hearing none, I'll move to the approval of minutes. Move for approval.
Sorry, move for approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call?
Director Denner.
Yes.
Director Gray.
Aye.
Director O'Brien. Yes. Vice Chair Avila. Aye. Chair Freeman.
Yes.
Motion carries with unanimous.
God bless. Bless you. On the consent agenda, are there any questions on the item A, the approval of the payable check register?
I'll move for approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call.
Director Bennett.
Yes.
Director Gregg.
Aye.
Director O'Brien. Yes. Vice Chair Avila.
Aye.
Chair Freeman.
Aye.
Motion carries with unanimous vote.
For clarification, was that just on item A or was that on item A and B?
Generally, when we do consent calendar, it's for all the items
Right,
on the
I just
consent calendar.
want to make sure. Okay. Presentations, scheduled items, and public hearings. Item A, presentation of certificate of commendation to Scott Brody Denham for completion of his Eagle Scout project, Mount McCoy boulder plaque, signage, and trail improvement.
Thank you, Chair and Board. Nikki Collier from the Recreation Department will present staff's report.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is Brody Denham. Brody wanted to do an Eagle Scout project that incorporated Simi Valley history as well as his own family history. Brody's family arrived here in Simi Valley in 1904 as early farmers known as the Rump family. Brody himself has been hiking Mount McCoy since the age of 5. For the first part of his project, Brody built a trail marker sign located at the base of the Water Tower Service Road and 40th Presidential Drive. He did this portion of his project specifically to provide more access to those who may have mobility challenges. For the second portion of his project, he built a historical memorial plaque that represents the meaning behind the placement of the cross and highlights the people and families that ensured its legacy. The plaque is affixed to a large rock just at the base of the cross. The historical memorial that has been built is placed near the bench where the trailheads meet when walking to the cross. The process to do this included building a cement base to perfectly align the boulder into the cement. The boulder thereafter had the plaque inset into the carved front that him and his dad grinded to allow for perfect placement. Brody stated that his project could not have been completed without the help of his friends, Troop 605, Troico, Rancho Simi Recreation and Park District, his family, and especially his dad. Brody's project was completed on December 9th of last year with Paul Friedeborn, Brian Dinner, friends and family, Simi Pacific Building, and Troop 605. Thank you, Brody.
I as well have a gift to the Rancho Simi Park and Rec District. It is a picture of me etched, just a little thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does any board member wish to comment?
Brody, in a moment, we're going to say, come take a picture with us, but when we do that, I'm going to ask that your family and your supporters come up with you. I see Mary over there. The other people that helped you with the project that are here tonight. But I would like to point out a couple of things that I haven't mentioned before. I grew up right next to that hill, and I have a lot of fond memories on Mount McCoy. The total trail, do I have it right? It's about 1.5 miles?
0.71?
0.71, so there and back?
No, just there.
Okay, so the reason I point that out is when we say accessibility, like is a hike that almost anybody that could hike could do. It's really short. And the nice part to that is before it used to say no trespassing, but it was public property. It was confusing because there's a water tower. But now it's really clear for visitors to the Reagan Library that you can hike there and then get a good view of the Reagan Library in Simi Valley. So a show of hands, if we could get some pledges tonight, who is willing to hike it in the next few months? It's a really short hike. You just did we were doing the math. Just, all right. So we could get that pledge. And the next thing is, I believe it's the most popular post I've ever seen, the Acorn Post. As of tonight, right before the meeting, or during the meeting, 946 likes on that post. You see people running for like governor or president not getting posts like that. And the reason I point out is there's a lot of negativity in the world, and there's a place for that, but this is a positive item, so maybe we could get that number to 1,000 a little bit later if we see some phones out. So Brody, congratulations on that. It solved a personal problem with, I see people thinking, oh, I'm not supposed to go there. Now they know they can, and they're welcome to. And I especially appreciate you worked with the Historical Society. You worked with the Reagan Library. When you came up with your project, it was so ambitious. I was like, oh, that sounds good, but what's your backup plan? Well, you didn't need a backup plan because you got it done. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Is there any other comment by board members?
Thank you. I just want to say thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, same here. Great stuff. Great work. Thank you. Congratulations.
Let's get a picture.
Congratulations. Thank you.
So I hand it to like,
Thank you all, thank you.
Great, I like
Wait, okay. Do you want
Multiple phones.
Yeah, I got only two hands and.
You need a squeeze?
All right, Teresa, you want to go? No, do this one. Okay, one more. All right, we got it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good job.
your hang is somewhere cool. I like you guys being this fun.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Another one done. Let's set a
That's you,
record.
right? Yeah, thanks. You got it.
Thank you so
Of
much.
course, yep.
Now we gotta find a place to hang that.
Next item, presentation of the full-time employee of the month, December 2023, to Rudy Cardenas, crew leader.
Thank you, Chair. Teresa Pennington, the District's Director of Administration, will provide staff's report.
Chair Freeman and members of the board. The full-time employee of the month for December 2023 is Rudy Cardenas. Rudy is a crew leader with the Planning and Maintenance Department. He's been with the district for 13 years, and this is his 5th Employee of the Month award. The person who submitted this nomination stated, "Learning and thriving in the open spaces and trails of Simi Valley and Oak Park, Rudy has accumulated knowledge, experience, and an overall grasp of the maintenance needed to hold these areas to a high standard, which he manages to accomplish daily. As a licensed heavy equipment operator, he has clocked many hours on countless pieces of equipment. This experience allows for exceptional training for other employees. Rudy has also resolved many issues with water runoff management, specifically at Challenger Park, saving time and material costs. Rudy promotes and understands his crew's strengths and utilizes them efficiently to get the job done. He leads with an open mind and listens to his coworkers' concerns, reports, and issues. He's flexible and allows his crew to brainstorm and provide insight. He takes suggestions into consideration and gives decisive and clear instructions. Rudy most of all promotes safety. Thank you for that, Rudy. He makes sure his employees are aware of and acknowledge possible safety hazards to themselves and park patrons. His personal safety record is exemplary. Rudy enjoys and appreciates his career and promotes the betterment of the district. He's well deserving of this award. Congratulations, Rudy.
Any board members? Does anyone wish to comment? Board members?
I'll comment. Thank you for your hard work and congratulations. Rudy, 5 Employee of the Month awards. You got to be moving up the ladder close to a record. That's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and it's nice to be recognized. I mean, I don't like to say, "Oh, I'm this guy, I'm that guy," but you know, I am the guy. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Wait a minute, we're going to get a picture.
Okay. We like to hire employees that are confident.
Before you take the picture, or while you're taking your picture, I only have a couple of comments about Mr. Cardenas. Mr. Cardenas is probably one of the most joyful people I've ever met. He always got a smile on his face. He never has a bad thing to say about anybody. He's a hard worker. And, well, he's a hard worker, but not that great of a fisherman.
Don't go there, please stop.
Put that in the minutes.
One trip I was on a boat with him, he didn't look look too good, but that's okay. Rudy, you're an outstanding gentleman, you're a great crew leader, and you're the only crew leader that I haven't received any complaints on. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
Not trivial. Gonna get the picture.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you. Thank you
All
very
that
much.
equipment that we use. Yeah.
And I'll pass it on to the next guy.
Thanks, Rudy.
Thank you.
Our next item is consideration and discussion of golf course utilization reports and consultants. Whoops, I skipped somebody, didn't I? Yeah. Sorry, Teresa. Part-time employee of the month for December 2023 is Nikki Bim.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Pennington will provide the report.
Thank you. The part-time employee of the month for December 2023 is Nikki Bim. Nikki is an administrative assistant 4 with the planning and maintenance department. She's worked for the district for 10 years, and this is her first Employee of the Month award. The person who submitted the nomination stated, Nikki is worthy of this award not only because she's a dedicated employee, but because she cares. She cares enough about her employment with the district to support several different supervisors and coordinators when they are low on staff. She cares enough to adjust her schedule to better fit the needs of the district. She cares enough to donate additional time and resources to not only support district events, but historical society events as well. Nikki recently co-chaired a historical society event, A Journey Through Time. This was the first time the Historical Society hosted this event. It takes a lot of planning and time to pull off a successful event, but due to Nikki's knowledge of military history, her connection with outside military volunteer groups, and the time and dedication she gave to this event, she was able to help the Historical Society bring another successful event to our community. Nikki's always trying to think outside the box, bringing new ideas to the district and to her supporting role at Stratton Historical Park and Museum. Her friendly disposition and eagerness to help is greatly appreciated by staff, volunteers, and the community she interacts with daily. We're fortunate to have her on our team as a district employee. Congratulations, Nikki.
Just want to say thank you. It means a lot. I put in so much work and I love working for the district. I work under several supervisors, under recreation and PMO, and just, I love working with everybody, so thank you so much.
Thank you. I mean, 10 years, we're grateful for your service.
Thank you.
You've seen a lot of changes.
Yeah,
Yes.
several. I volunteered for the district first, and then I became part-time, so
Yes.
I've been here for over 10 years, including the volunteer time, so.
Good for you. Thank you. Good for us.
Yeah,
Is there other
yes.
comments by board members?
I just want to say thank you for your dedication. 10 years is a long time. So,
Come on up and we'll have your picture.
Sure, I think
I think somebody
Yeah.
else would like to speak.
And so that kind of says it all, but Nikki is so amazing. We are so fortunate to have her with the district. I worked with her as the volunteer coordinator. She filled in when Cindy was gone. She helped me then. She's always got my back. So whether she was working directly under me or working somewhere else and I needed her, she's always come up over the past 10 years. So no matter where I was working, she was always there to help out. And even still now as an employee at Stratton, she backs up Laura, she backs up Alternative Rec, she backs up Oak Park. She still is going to all these different facilities. She's there for everybody when they meet her. And the Historical Society too. So she's been amazing and very, very fortunate that we have her. So that's all. Thank you.
Come up, Nikki. Does anybody else wish to comment?
I'll just say thank you so much for all your service. I know every time we chat, you have a smile on your face. And I appreciate the positive attitude whenever you're either volunteering or working. Thank you again and congratulations.
And this is really important.
Sounds good. I'll make sure I run with him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. consideration and discussion of golf course utilization reports and consulting.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brian Ray, the golf course manager, will present staff's report.
Evening, Honorable Chair, members of the board. My report tonight will be about golf course utilization and consulting.
I apologize, the mic isn't on.
Oh, is it not on? Oh, sorry about that. My report this evening is about golf course utilization and consulting. At the June 7th, 2023 meeting, the board discussed golf course fees and utilization and requested that staff research and bring back for consideration options for providing expanded utilization reports and analysis. Specific information requested included rounds played by time frame and utilization levels, which could be compared to similar local courses. Golf course management consultants offer a comprehensive array of analytical services aimed at optimizing the overall efficiency and performance of golf courses. These professionals possess expertise in various aspects of golf course operations, including revenues, maintenance, and market analysis. With a thorough understanding of industry trends and best practices, these consultants work closely with golf course owners and managers to identify areas for improvement and implement strategic solutions. The cost of engaging such consultants typically ranges between $30,000 to $60,000, reflecting the depth and breadth of the analysis and recommendations they provide to enhance the success and profitability of golf courses. Alternatively, staff can produce detailed utilization reports by hour to aggregate this data to show rounds played by day, time, and fee type, weekends, weekdays, prime, twilight, etc. Detailed data is available for the past 2 years, but due to a software change in 2021, staff does have some limited availability to extract data for a full detailed analysis prior to that. Monthly rounds and revenue totals are available, and general trends and analysis can be produced from that information. Staff level analysis can be done with in-house resources at no additional expense. The alternatives, retain a golf course management consultant to provide an in-depth analysis of review and management opportunities to optimize efficiencies at Park District golf courses with the specific outcomes that the board would like to have provided. Alternative 2, direct staff to conduct higher level of analysis with in-house resources, defining what type of information would be most useful to the board to make policy decisions and impact golf operations. Or option 3, operate as we have in the past with Park District staff providing data and analysis based on experience and professional recommendations that they believe will help shape policy and revenue goals for the board. And with that said, I invite your questions.
Are there questions from the board? Director Evelyn?
I have a lot of questions, so if you have.
I just have one general one. I remember having a discussion, but I don't recall the details of why we want to spend $30,000 to $60,000 to find out if we're utilizing the golf course. Is there some reason why we think we're not utilizing it properly? Golf course.
I think it was an idea of a board member to explore this option.
It was my idea, and I think there's a lot of reasons to believe that we're not, but that's probably more of a comment than it is. Yeah.
Curious about that.
Director Evelyn, did you wish to ask questions?
Yes, I did. I think the first thing, Dan, when I made this request, I actually had 3 things that I was looking at, and the issue of the consultant came up because one of the things I was looking at is see if we could improve our economic or supply-demand analysis. And if I'm understanding correctly, that's where the idea of a consultant came in. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, a second area that I wanted to discuss, but I don't see in the report, is the idea of, and actually I want to start off by giving Brian Reed credit for this. This actually, this whole concept, not just as it relates to golf, but to the entire district, came from the fact that Brian took the time to do some surveys of golf courses. So the second part that I wanted to ask about is, would it be beneficial for our golf courses, and I think it's a discussion for another time as to other aspects of the district, to do more elaborate surveys that gets a feel for what the public is really looking for. I know this is done in a lot of organizations, and my understanding from talking to staff, there's other staff that have picked up on what Brian did in terms of conducting surveys. So I know that isn't addressed in the report. So that would be my next question.
If I could, Chair, we had intended to provide that information this evening as part of the verbal report, but if Brian could describe for us what he has done for surveys, potentially in the past or currently, and then we can get to what we may want to do now and in the future. So Brian, if you could give us a brief explanation of what we've done to survey the golfers in the community about our services.
Sure, yeah, we do undertake, professional and internal reviews on a regular basis. We did what's called a golf local market analysis in 2008 as a company called Pellucid Corp. They come in and they do a pretty in-depth demographic study. They look at incomes and everything, and they don't really have a lot of ability to compare apples to apples with other golf courses, because not all golf courses.
I'm sorry, Brian. Survey information, getting feedback from golfers.
From golfers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what have we done in terms of getting feedback from our customers?
Gotcha. So recently when we switched to our new software provider in 2021, we engaged a company called Players First, and we had them on board for an entire year, the year of 2022. They did an automated survey that sent out to every golfer who played the golf course who had an email address on file. So the ones that didn't have an email address we didn't get, but we sent out something like 45,000 email survey requests. We got 700 or 800 back, and they didn't really end up producing a usable analysis of that data, but we cataloged them, and Blake went through them, and there were good points and bad points, comments, what people liked and didn't like about the golf course. Generally, the best comment was always about the greens, that we had greens better than every other golf course that most people play. The bad comment was pace of play, and that they didn't see the beverage card enough. But most of those feedback were mirror images of each other. I mean, it was over and over and over again. So by the time we got through the first year with them, we didn't really see that it was useful to spend $1,000 a year to continue engaging with them. But we do surveys of every year when we do our city championship. We have a survey that we send out to all the players to just pull that same information, what we do, how do you like it, how do we compare with other courses. And so those are the things that we've done most recently that have more of a professional finished survey to them. Obviously, we talk to golfers on a daily basis and ask them how their day went, how their round went, where else they play, all of those things. And so we have that informal information that we collect on a daily basis. But
so Director Avila, if we could.
Actually, one more thing. There's actually one more thing you did, because I listened to everything and said at every meeting. You actually personally went out and gave your own analysis of other comparative golf courses, correct?
Right. I actually last year I went out and played all of the courses that are on that were on the our competitive market set that I quote in my board reports. I went out and visited every one of them last year and played every one of them, so that I really had a good first-hand look at what kind of condition the facilities are in, what the value was, how the greens were, how the turf conditions were, and I talked to golfers while I'm doing it. Most of the time, I went out and just joined up with groups there at the course as a single, so I could actually get feedback of people who are regulars there. So I did play every course that we compete with last year.
Did you have something?
Yeah. So Chair, as looking forward relative to a consultant looking forward to getting survey data, we can collect the information we have that Brian did through that prior company and share that with the board. But if you want to do more surveying, we can incorporate that as a part of some future effort to survey more folks. I'd have to work with the staff and kind of scope that with them. I would say relative to selecting a management consultant, it may be a different group. Like Brian said, he had worked with another company. So the survey can take a lot of hours. So it may be something that's directed by the board, but it may not be a part of the engagement with a management consultant on the financial part.
Right, and for me, I wanted to ask about the survey thing because, the one thing is surveys are valuable to organizations, companies, government organizations. They are valuable, and there's probably things we can do that are more instructive than what we have done, but I do give credit that the process has started, and I know Brian was an impetus for that, so I think that's a good thing, so I wanted it to be discussed. The third thing that I asked for that isn't discussed in the report, and I suspect since the suggestion of a consultant came up as a result of my request for how we can better, because we seem to have been falling short on the supply-demand analysis part, how we can better, be in tune to optimizing our revenue. But the third part was something more for the future maybe than for the present, and that was discussion of how we approach dynamic pricing. And I noticed that wasn't addressed in the report. Is that something that could be done through the consultant as well?
Correct. That would be when we talk about a scope of work for the consultant. If the board selects to go in that direction, we can take ideas on what types of things the board would want to look at. That would be in addition to Brian and I and Zach also putting together a scope of work for the consultant. So the idea there was, yes, if the board would like to look at an alternative or explore dynamic pricing, it doesn't mean we're doing it, at least look at it. That would be built into the scope of the work for the consultant.
Right, and so you're anticipating one of my questions down the road, so I'll go with that question right now. If we were to have a consultant look at our economics for the golf course and our supply and demand, one of the things that you suggested to me, and so I'm assuming you think it would be beneficial, would it be beneficial for that consultant to speak with each board member to get an idea of how they view optimizing revenue?
Yeah, there's several ways we can do that. It's at the board's direction. If the board wants to provide feedback to any consultant we have, the board can certainly do that. We can bring back the contract for the board to approve, and the board can provide it at that time if you'd like. So we can structure input either from the board or from staff or from select customers to sit with the consultant. We can structure a consultant engagement any way the board would like to do that.
And one of the things that would be useful about that, I'm assuming, we did have a fee analysis study done several years ago that was good from an informational standpoint, but one of the problems with that, I think that we all noticed, was that it didn't really take into consideration some of the board's concerns. Would you agree with that? The golf course budget is roughly around or upwards of about $5 million, is that correct?
Yeah, 4.9, yeah, including Sinaloa, or?
Yeah, including Sinaloa.
Yeah,
so,
near 5, yes.
So essentially, the cost of a consultant would be less than 1% of 1 year's budget.
Correct.
And the benefit that could be obtained from that consultant is something that could be a benefit to our golf courses in our district for decades.
We could use the expertise from an outside agency to inform some of our management decisions for a period of time.
And I want to ask you some questions about optimizing, and I use the word optimize as opposed to maximizing the budget in a minute. But when we discussed this, Dan, am I accurate in saying that from a standpoint of optimizing the budget, that you felt that a consultant would be helpful?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a philosophical policy discussion in here, and that is, it's kind of related to board priority. So, and there's what I'm saying is, if we're doing a good job at the course, we all know that. We're doing a good job with the maintenance of the course, we do a good job with operations. The revenue, the course is fully sustainable as it is now. So if the board wants to continue with it, which is the more conservative choice and not as, say, creative. So if that's the choice, we probably don't need a consultant. That being said, if the board wants to be more creative and wants to explore and even maybe give us some good ideas, but also potentially validate some of the things we're already doing, it can't hurt to bring in some outside eyes that are experts in the industry. Not that Brian's an expert in the industry, but he only has so much time. He's running the course every day. So if we want to do a more in-depth analysis, if we want to get a perspective from a golf consultant that's out at these courses and understands the operations, and that's important to the board to optimize the operations of the golf course, I would say we would benefit from having a consultant. So it's kind of weaved in with what the board wants to do.
And just so that we're clear, there really are two parts to this, right, Dan? There's the golf course operations part, and then there's the economics of it.
Yes, if we were going to bring in a consultant, I'd want him to look at both while we went through the exercise.
Right. But with the understanding, I don't know that I think there's no disagreement in terms of the fact that the golf course operations part of it is outstanding. I assume the focus would probably be on the economics.
Correct, and as Brian mentioned, the market analysis, so that they'll come in with expertise, look at income, those kind of things, and see what the tolerance level is for different fee structures, fee categories, dynamic pricing, and things like that. So they're experts in kind of when you say supply and demand, it's what Brian is saying is market analysis.
Okay, it's right, the same terminology.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of optimizing a budget, would you agree that one of the considerations, the obvious one, is revenue generation? Okay. But there are other considerations as well. If we're talking about optimizing our budget and optimizing our revenue as opposed to maximizing, another concern, and I know it's been expressed by multiple board members, including myself, would be access to the golf course for the public. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be a part of the market analysis, and that's when I'm talking about that yin and the yang with priorities. So naturally, and I'm just saying this very simply, the higher the prices, the less access you're having for certain income levels. But part of this would be optimizing that. So trying to figure out that price point that's tolerable for the community, is accessible, but also optimizes the revenue generation opportunities.
And I want to come back to that in a second. But so we have revenue generation, we have access, and then another aspect of it would be fairness and equitability. Is that correct?
If that's what the board would like the consultant to consider, we can do that.
And as an example of that, one thing that didn't come across so well for the district and the golf course situation was where we discovered as a board, and I think you, Dan, for the first time a year ago, that for upwards of 15 years we had a situation where certain golfers were given priority in terms of prime time tee times over other golfers.
I would say with respect to that, like any business, you want to treat your good customers well. So I think that was an effort to do that 15 years ago. So I think we would want if the board directed it, we want the consultant to also weigh on taking care of our returning customers.
But doing it in a way that takes into consideration that we are a public entity and a public golf course. So on the access part, I want to delve in a little bit more on that. There's really a couple aspects of that. I think the one obvious one is when we talk about access, we want to be able to have our youth, our seniors, our lower income residents, we want them to be able to golf on our public golf courses. Would that be accurate?
Correct. Maybe, if Brian has anything on that. Yeah, but I think, and that's with all our programs, that we try to have a price point in the district. We try to keep our fees low. We try to keep our expenses tight so we can keep the fees low so that we can provide access to as many people as possible across all of our programs.
Right. Let me do one follow-up on that. The other thing we want to do, though, is we want to make sure that we are getting revenue from these programs, and particularly discretionary ones like golf. And I know that Kate had mentioned when we were talking about the fees for facility fees, that we do we're charging the taxpayers, so we do need to charge people for using our facilities. And in the case of youth, or in the case of after-school clubs, we understand that those are somewhat needs-based, but in terms of golf, to a large extent, that's discretionary. So we want to make sure that we're doing something that makes sure that we're getting the revenue that we should be getting.
Understood. Yeah, we do. We do need financial stability, both in the short term and long term. So when we make short term decisions, it affects the long term. So the board wants to provide a great service to the community across all venues, and those services are different in what they are. Like you said, there's after-school club, which you might consider a high-priority child care issue, and you might consider other things more discretionary than, say, a basic need, so to speak. So when the board makes decisions on fees, that would be a part of your guys' philosophy that I'm talking about.
And so one of the other aspects of access, we've discussed the fact that we want to make sure that we allow our youth and our seniors and our lower income individuals to have access to the golf courses. The other side of it is one of the reasons the whole thing came up about certain individuals who use our golf course in terms of having priority tee times. One of the reasons that came up, if I'm correct, for 5 years or more now, we've had a situation where there has been more demand than there has been availability in terms of our prime time hours. Is that accurate?
I'll let Brian answer that question in a little more detail.
I think that's fair to say. I mean, demand is strong, and we could sell 8 o'clock, Saturday morning 100 times over.
So in terms of having fair access, the other part of it is to make sure that we're equaling out the supply and demand factor, which would then indicate that whereas we might be trying to keep the prices down for some individuals, there may be other areas like prime time where both in terms of generating revenue and in terms of providing equal access, we might want to consider increasing.
I think that's part of the trick, because we got income levels also, and we are a public course. So even if we want to create access in those prime times based on supply and demand and optimize it there, we also got to recognize that those lower income levels who can only play on a Saturday and Sunday morning can also still access the course at the times they can play. So that's kind of the rub on the supply and demand, and the yin and yang with us being a public course and considering income levels.
And so we've talked about access, we've talked about fairness and equitability. One other thing I want to come back to is it is still about revenue generation, because our golf courses are probably our best revenue generating vehicle. Is that correct in the district?
Yes.
Right. And if you recall, if we go back about 5 years, there was a situation where a majority of the board, I believe Kate, Brian, and myself, voted to increase the fees more than maybe some others would have liked. And as it turned out, with the way that demand spiked during the pandemic, had we not done that, we would have missed out on a lot of revenue.
True. On the weekends, yes.
During the prime time.
During the prime times, yeah. I can't say if the rates affected the midweek, because we're not completely full midweek all the time. So.
Right.
But we were during the pandemic.
Yeah, we were during the pandemic. Yes, we were.
Probably even beyond prime time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fair to say.
I have a couple of just miscellaneous questions I want to ask. In that situation, I had requested to see, in particular, what our prime time levels were during the last 5 years, and obviously it wasn't a surprise we were packed. But as Brian indicated, we only had specific data for the last 2 years. Can you just explain again what the reason was for that?
We have hard copy reports going back a number of years, but working with those takes a lot of time. So, go ahead.
Yeah. So the previous golf management system we used was a platform called Golf Now Reservations. It used to be called 4 Reservations before that. Golf Now sundowned that technology. They ended support for it, so we were forced off the platform. So we had to switch off to a different software provider because it was ending at the end of 2021. So we jumped ship, and unfortunately, one of the things that they can't export is sales history from other management systems. So it was just, we printed out monthly sales reports all the way back as far as we had. And so we had monthly reports, and we could, chew on that data, but
So we have monthly hard copy reports. I think the key is easily accessible. So it takes a lot of time to aggregate those monthly reports into historical data.
Was there a way of preserving that data when the switchover took place, other than hard copy?
No, it was, well, we actually, we exported it on Excel, so we have all of that data in Excel. We can manipulate it around in a spreadsheet, but it didn't, we weren't able to save it in any kind of database that's searchable.
So I was mistaken, we have downloaded all the data into Excel, and so it's not just hard copy, we have a database of all the old data.
Right.
Okay.
All right, those are my questions, thanks.
Chair?
Are there other questions?
I think Director Gray is asking.
Yeah, Brian, has there, I know the board has gotten a few emails in regards to recent price changes, especially with the new program, but what would you say, how much pushback versus just acceptance has there been since the price changes in the last year for golfing?
You mean like the membership program that we implemented, or
just in general, increased prices? And then my follow-up question is about the new program.
Okay, yeah, so fees, we really don't get a lot of pushback. I get a few comments here and there, but they still play because there's really not a whole lot of options. Mostly the people who play a lot, have a bigger, dog in the fight, so, they pay more for golf overall, and, so every time we raise rates, we get a little bit of pushback, but it really hasn't changed their playing habits, and that's one of the strategies that we try to pursue, is we try to, rub as much as we can without really pushing anybody away. That's, how we've kind of approached it. But with the membership program, we've sold something like 160 of them so far. 140 of them are residents, and maybe 19 non-residents have bought that. So the overwhelming majority, I get ones or twos here and there who think that we're, ripping them off, but for the most part, everybody loves it because now they can get tee times. They're only competing against a small group of people, and it's easier for them to get their desired time than it was trying to, fight with the crowd at 8 o'clock on 8 days out. So it's actually better for the regulars who play a lot of golf.
So they're looking at it like as an investment, and on a per game basis, it's really minimal.
Right. I mean, if you do the math, because only one of the members has to have the, tee time, so they can split it amongst the foursome, so it's $50 a person, $1 a week if you do the math. It's really pretty minimal, and it's, gone over, fairly well.
Are there
So
other
you
questions?
call that program a success?
Did you have any
Oh yeah, for sure. It's 40 grand. Thank you.
Director Gray, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, one more. Thank you. Brian, since our past price changes, I know we elevated them to remain in competition with neighboring golf courses. Would you say, I know not a lot of time has passed since then, but would you say we're still roughly in that same zone compared to how we price out against the competitors? Or has that changed since then?
Yeah, we're roughly about in the same relationship. I know a couple of the golf courses have raised fees just recently. I haven't gone and done my survey yet. That's coming up here this month. Yeah. But some courses have raised fees. I get a report from the National Golf Course Owners Association. It's called their Pulse report. It's an annual report. It's 40 pages long, so it's kind of big, but I can send it to you if you want. It's a analysis and interviews from golf course owners all over the whole country. And one of the macro takeaways, from MCOs, they call them multi-course operators, is a lot of courses are kind of holding steady right now on rates. There are some that are in certain markets that have demand and they're raising rates, but other courses are kind of holding steady because they feel like if the economy turns down a little bit, they may see some attrition. So a lot of the sentiment, nationally is, that the courses are kind of at equilibrium. But as far as we're concerned, I think we are still right in that range, right amongst the better of the public courses. We're right in that range where we ought to be pretty close.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address this issue? there anyone online? I don't see anyone. Do you see anyone on Zoom?
I do not, Chair.
With that, I will close the public hearing and board comments.
Okay. As most of you know, I'm a little hesitant to spend public money on all kinds of things, but thinking about this, if our revenues are 5 million and the maximum we think it won't be more than 60,000, that's like a 1% of the revenue, as Director Avila pointed out, to make sure we're optimizing. I don't think it's a bad idea. You might want to look into it.
Is it 5 million of revenue or 5 million budget?
Budget's, 4.9 something.
4.9 something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's,
So our annual operating revenue is about 5 million. We also have a reserve fund for capital projects in addition to that that's been saved over the years.
all right.
So that means it's actually more than 5.
Now, we have a list. We have a list of objectives here yet. We obviously need to create one if we haven't got one.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. I'd be in favor of looking into that.
I'm sorry?
I would be in favor of looking into that and having a consultant.
Sure. Director Gray?
Sure. So I think one of my concerns on going for an outside consultant is that, after paying the consultant, there does become kind of an obligation to cover those additional costs incurred from it. And I think the premise is based on belief that there is a large dearth between optimal performance financially versus where we're at. And I would say personally, well, like perfect optimization is great. I think that anywhere between 30 and 60,000, I don't know how much more optimized it can get versus having to then pay for those additional costs. I think I'm concerned that any recommendations might be things that are just, I guess would be against the philosophy I take to the golf course of, we want to pay and cover our expenses and costs and all of that and be competitive without wanting, I don't want to eliminate access or make it just that much more difficult for someone locally to play. We are a public entity, and so it's one of those optimal. I think we are competitive with nearby areas. We provide a good service, and I think our job as a whole is to provide a good service for the community that they can access, just like they could access other programs or other offerings we have at the park to do different sports. This unfortunately costs more than if you're a fan of pickleball. In pickleball, they pay currently they're just waiting, and that's the price they're paying. So I just don't see a large enough dearth based on past staff reports, our adjustment of fees, and I don't think I've been convinced, and I think from my understanding of where we could change and get more bang for our buck is the dynamic pricing, which I then think boxes people out who would be interested. And I don't know that I agree with dynamic pricing in general as a philosophy, let alone for a public golf course to be using dynamic pricing to squeeze a few more dollars or cents out of folks. That being said, if the rest of the board goes with a consultant, I will absolutely listen and share my philosophy with them. I'm not going to ignore it, but I don't think I see the cost benefit here as being worthwhile. And if we came out zero sum of, they save us 30,000, but they cost us 30,000. We've also spent a lot of staff time and a lot of energy getting to the end result.
Thank you. Director Denner?
Brian, I want to start with saying that you have my respect. You're professional, you're well liked. The golf course is a jewel in our community. The players are happy with the job that you do. And anything that I suggest would be support for what you do. And I wouldn't want to do it if it was creating doubt or undermining your efforts and your well done job. I'm leaning towards working with a consultant, but I have a couple concerns before we vote on it. One is, I don't like the price, but as a part of the overall budget, it might make sense. That said, is I almost said Chair, Director Graham getting used to a switch. It's not going to be worth it if we ignore their suggestions. So if they come back to us with suggestions and we're like, well, absolutely not, we don't like any of those ideas. Thanks for the 30 years, $60,000. So that means we should approach it with an open mind to their suggestions. One example of this is, I agreed with some of what you said, but one thing that I disagreed with is if we just say seniors deserve an automatic discount based off of age. That doesn't make sense to me, because you can have a wealthy senior paying less than a middle class working person, and the middle class working person can only golf on the weekends. So that, you know, it's more expensive on the weekends and during the week. Just because they're a senior doesn't mean they're in need. Now I do understand some seniors play often, that's good, and we want them to be active. But just that senior age category by itself doesn't make sense to me. Now if it's a frequent user, comeback customer, or a financial issue, that might be different to me. The next part to that is winning a customer is a lot harder than retaining a customer. So I wouldn't want to go down a path where we alienate our customer base and we attract a few more customers, but we lost steady customers. So with the results from the consultant, I'd be concerned about that. And then not too much more, but the consultant might say to raise some fees. So probably not going to tell you, oh, your fees are too high. They're probably going to say raise some fees, but they're also possibly going to say lower some fees to attract customers we might otherwise be losing. So it might be a mix of those two to optimize our use of the golf course. And then, although I'm leaning towards a consultant, I do think this type of work would be best suited to a golf committee. So we could meet each one of us with the consultant one by one to give our input. And if a board member is an expert in golf or has been analyzing the issue for a long time, which I do understand you put a lot of work into it, that makes sense. But if all 5 of us walk in with 5 different ideas and give us our input, that might be different than sometimes Ed comes up with an idea at first, I'm like, I don't know about this, what's he talking about? But then I listen to him, I listen to his arguments, I meet with staff afterwards and ask good questions, I go back to him and ask him more questions, and sometimes he persuades me to his way of thought. The reason I mention that is if we had a golf committee that sometimes met, especially on an issue like this, not necessarily as we discussed with a final recommendation and none of us have input, but to bounce ideas back and forth as we go over it to give proper direction to the consultant of what we want to see, I think that'd be good. I think it'd be difficult in a meeting type setting where it's like earlier, I don't have any questions, but the conversation's already framed by our questions, and then we go to public comment, versus an open meeting that's noticed to the public, but we could listen to the consultant bounce ideas off of each other, and the board members most invested in the topic and with the most knowledge of it, instead of 5 different directions and the consultants going in 5 different ways. So I think, and I know we'll discuss this later because we have committees coming up tonight, I think that'd be the best and most efficient use of our time to optimize the golf course. So that said, I'm open to suggestion number 1, but I want to make sure that we show respect to our staff, that we understand that they are very knowledgeable and provide us with opportunities to give input. But in this case, outside consultant might help us with the supply-demand analysis part to it.
Chair, if I could. I have several questions on the comment, but I'd like to hear from all of you just overall, and then I'm going to need some additional direction from you based on some of your comments, Brian, in terms of process and how we get to a scope of work if we're headed in that direction. So if we could do that, and then I'll have a series of clarifying questions of the board if I could.
Director Evelyn?
And I can't get my, oh, here we go, all right. Right, so, well, first of all, the comment that Director Dennert, you made about seniors, I don't necessarily disagree with. I was using that as an example in terms of questions. I think there's a lot of merit to what you said, and that's where, again, having a consultant would be really helpful. As I suggested through my questioning, and Kate indicated during her comments, the price for the consultant, considering the overall amount of golf revenue and golf budget, is actually really small in terms of learning what we can do, what we can learn in terms of, I believe that the term Brian used, probably more artful market analysis, or as I'm using, supply and demand. I just think the value of it would be great. And I'll give an example. Going back to one of my questions was 5 years ago when the majority of the board raised rates more than was originally anticipated, and it turned out to be the wise thing to do. There was one board member who's no longer on the board who, at a later meeting, got up and argued about how it was going to cause us to lose over $100,000, and in effect, it made us a lot more than that. So it isn't just an incremental issue here. In that case, it was a question of if you go from what was projected by one board member to what we actually accomplished by it, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue. So now granted, that might be an extreme example, that might be a one-time thing, but it isn't a matter of just something that's incremental. The second part of it is, and it's part of the reasons why I asked Dan the questions, part of it is, yes, trying to generate without alienating the public and without excluding the public. Part of it is generating as much revenue as we can, but the other part of it is the access issue. And I use seniors as an example, and that probably was a bad example, but whether it's youth, whether it's lower income people, it's finding the sweet spot for that in terms of not just prime time hours, but whether it's twilight rates or other rates that allow the entire public to be able to use the golf courses, and yet make it fair and equitable as far as the prime time usage, and at the same time generate as much revenue as we can while accomplishing those other things. So there's so many aspects in which a consultant can help us, especially at what really is such a small cost. And you know, I mean, I have an economic background, but I'm not an economic expert. And when I came up with that idea 5 years ago, and something that we, up until last year, expanded on since, that worked successfully, that was a basic economic background. It's a tough responsibility to put on one board member, to put on the district manager, to put on the golf course manager, when we can get expertise at such a small cost from a consultant. So I strongly support the consultant idea, and I really think we're missing out in an important area if we don't do that.
Okay. Any other comments by board members?
I just have a question, which it just occurred to me. Is it possible? What are the things I'd worry about if we spent $60,000 to find out we're absolutely perfect? Are we okay with that? And if we're not, can we find a golf consultant who could perhaps do a quick survey and tell us if we need further study or not? Is that doable? Does that work?
I will. I'll comment on that.
Okay.
Just my personal opinion is that if you're running a business, and the golf course is a business,
Yeah.
That's why it's an enterprise fund. It is a government course, it's a public course, but it's also a business. In my opinion, I don't know that even if they validate what we're already doing, we would know that. Right now, we don't know that. So even if we put them to work and they say, hey, you guys are doing great, and you know things are good, and it's a due diligence step, amongst the taxpayers and amongst you guys. So I don't. It's an insurance policy, and I think in that we haven't 2008, Brian, we haven't done it in quite a few years. You know, it gives us peace of mind that what we're doing is good. Or it may say different. It may say, hey, there's things you can improve. So yes, I understand the question of if they make recommendations and we don't implement them, the cost, but there is information there. It's validation of what we're doing. So that's kind of my perspective on that. And it's normal for businesses to bring in, especially larger businesses, it's normal for businesses to bring in industry experts to review their operations from time to time if you're running a large company or something of the sort.
Person.
Oh, sorry, Chair.
Okay.
Gary, do you mind if I ask a question?
We have so much information about who plays, what hours, what rates are coming in, and how we manage the course. And it's been very successful And I know that there's some people, you said there were a few, who pushed back on the 200. My point is, I'm not sure what I'm going to learn that I don't already know, or isn't already available, which is all the information that was in the report that you put together. We know what our rates are and how they align with other courses, and we are a public course, and we are serving the public. It's not like Wood Ranch or Sunset Hills or for membership. So I'm inclined to not understand why we even need to know more than what we already know. We know what the play is, we know who plays, we have a good revenue source, it's well managed, and I'm just concerned about our pushing too hard on the revenue side when we have a very stable revenue source with with both golf courses. So I don't exactly know why I need to know more than I already know, if that makes any sense. So.
Chair.
Josh has a question.
Director Gray?
Yeah, do you mind if I ask a question of staff?
Sure, go ahead, Josh.
Okay. Dan, Brian, so I think I'm more open after some of the board discussion, but I would kind of request or ask that in our search for a consultant, the consultant also have experience dealing with other public golf courses, and I want to make sure this consultant is also familiar with the mission of a public golf course, not just purely focused on how to optimize profit, but kind of optimize us towards our mission, which is enhancing revenue. But I think after hearing some board argument, I think I'm more open to paying $30,000 to $60,000 with no promises. That I'm open to hearing what they have to say, find out the unknown unknowns that we may have about the golf courses and the systems, but without promising, I guess I'm not going to go in feeling obligated that we have to make up the cost by accepting a premise from a consultant that may go against the philosophy that I have for our golf courses. But do you think that is, I guess my question was, is that possible to have a scope of the consultants of making sure, it doesn't have to be a consultant firm specifically focused just on that, but I would want some experience, some knowledge. I don't want to have recommendations from a consultant that just don't make sense for what we do versus what other golf courses may do.
So that kind of dovetails with some of my questions. So I'll address that, Josh, but I want to make sure all the board has made their comments, and it sounds like the majority of the board wants to pursue hiring a consultant. We're not voting, it sounds like I have consensus around that right now. Okay, so relative to follow-up, there's two important points in engaging the consultants. One is scoping the consultant's work, which is, so there may be certain information that each of you are interested in, Ed and Brian, Josh, what you're interested in, that public perspective. There's going to be information I'm interested in that if we're going to engage in a consultant, I'm going to want them to delve into some questions I have as the general manager. There's probably going to be information that Brian wants to see in a scope of work. You guys are doing it for policy matters. Brian may want them to dig into some operational comparisons. We don't know. So step one is scoping the survey. I will say that's also going to impact the cost, which is why there's a range there. But if we do a scope of work and all of us have 10 ideas and we're going to dive into I'm exaggerating, but counting pennies or counting rounds, it's all driven by number of hours with the consultant. So it's all going to be dependent on how many hours they think they need to spend. So that being said, the second part of this is after we hire the consultant, that's getting together with you guys and understanding your philosophies, what's important to you as they getting to know our course and making recommendations. So going back to the first step, which is scoping, there's a couple ways we can do that, I think. One way is for the staff and I to draft a scope of work based on the comment this evening for the consultant, right? Along with that, we could also meet individually with us, or I could take input from you guys individually. I can't tell you who's saying what, but if you guys want to give some thought to, hey, I'd really like to see the consultant dive into this, you guys could email me what you want to see the consultant do. With that, we could do a scope of work, and then we can go out to find a consultant that's going to best fit that. The other way to do that is to have staff put everything together based on tonight's discussion, come back to you as a whole before we issue the proposal, and have you review the scope of work as a group. If you do that, then at that meeting, you guys can add things as a group or individually that you might want to do to scope the work. So the first question is, how do you want to handle scoping the work of the consultant? We can either do option one, we put it together, you guys give us individual input, we put it in there and we go out without coming back to the board as a whole, or we could put it all together and then come back to you guys with, in a public meeting in a month or so and get your guys' input on the staff scope of work.
I'm okay either way. I think in the end it's going to come out to roughly the same result, so I would say whichever one works easiest for you.
Okay. My interest is making sure that when we send out the scope of work, we're tasking the consultant with what you guys want to see. That's the most important thing.
That staff put together the scope of work and bring it back to the board.
Okay, so we got one.
I would concur with Chair.
So that answers that. We'll based on tonight's input, we'll put together a draft scope of work, taking your guys' comments. We'll do the best we can to capture anything. If it's not in there, the next meeting you guys can add things or take things away. Okay.
Also, what would also be helpful would be have a copy of the report from 2008 that we did.
Yeah, we have it.
If we still have that available.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And
The second
I
piece.
would like to see a not to exceed on the contract. I don't want it open-ended.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like 35,000,
Okay.
not to exceed.
Okay.
Well, one of the concerns I have about that, I mean, I'm okay with that. I just think at that point, then it might put you in a spot where you have to pick and choose which board members' concerns you're taking into account. So I would suggest that we all have an interest in keeping it as low as we can. But I would say under 50,000 because that would still be under what
Another way to do that is to get bid options.
And it's more realistic.
So we can ask for bid options. So if there's a task that either we want to do or you guys want to do that we know is going to be a bunch of hours, we can say, give us a price for this, and then give us a separate price for this, and we can kind of see how much that scope may cost us. So then when we bring back the actual contract, you guys can see that. So we can do a not to exceed is a good idea. That being said, not to exceed, what that does is the check-in point for us. So if it's a not to exceed and the consultant says, hey Dan, we've spent all the money and we still have to do these tasks, then I'd have to come back to you to get authority to spend more than the not to. So it's a check in there too. So a not to exceed is not necessarily a problem. It's just a point in time where I'd have to come back and check with you guys before
But
we
the
spend any
consultant will know that there's a not to exceed. That's not unusual in the line of business to have a not to exceed contract.
I assume you've done some research on this, and if we're going to do a not to exceed, I would do it more along the lines of 50,000 because we know it's likely going to be more than 30,000. So if we're too limiting, we're defeating the purpose of getting all the board.
And the 50,000 is going to be dependent on what scope of work we pick. So we're going to judge how many hours this might take somebody, and if it's not a large scope of work, we may put a not to exceed 25. If we feel like we get the input and it's a large scope of work, once we kind of aggregate what we all want, we may pick a bigger not to exceed.
Wouldn't the scope of work simply be comparing what we're charging and what our policies are, operational policies, compared to other public courses that we're competitive with?
Just off the top of my head, I'm interested in an expense comparison to make sure we're efficiently operating the course.
Aren't we just saying that what we're charging and the service we're giving and is
That's why we
correct for
need
the
to put
market?
together the
Is
scope of
correct
work,
for the
because I'm not
market?
sure what we're saying.
I feel like I asked all those questions,
Yeah.
made all those comments, and wasn't heard. I think we've heard, Josh previously and tonight is concerned about access. I'm concerned about access. I'm concerned about fairness and equitability. I'm concerned about revenue. I'm concerned about all of it. So, like I say, I feel like I've spent all this time and haven't even been heard. So there's really a lot more to it when it comes to scope of work. However, that doesn't mean that it can't be narrowed down to a realistic point where, as you say, Dan, I think that the responsible thing would at least be allowing the leeway of 50,000. But as you say, there may be a way we're able to frame it, and it is 30,000. I mean, that would be great. So
That's why I think Brian and Zach and I need to look at some samples. There's probably all other golf courses, we can see what their price points were for some kind of consultant study, and then I'll have a much better idea when I bring that back to you, once I look at our scope and we estimate how many hours that may take somebody.
Like I said, we have all that information. We know what other public courses are charging. We know what their policies are. I mean, by that last report you gave us was pretty thorough.
Yeah, we know what they're charging, on the, at least on their public rates. We don't always know what happens, under the hood. Not every, even municipal golf courses, they don't all report their revenues in the same buckets, and they don't report their expenses in the same way. So one thing I would, kind of caution you is that, like, for example, Pro Forma Advisors, Gene Krikorian, I've known him for years, and, he reaches out to me on a regular basis when he does surveys for other municipal golf courses in California, because this is his world he lives in, and he contracts with, he just contracted with San Leandro last year and did a market study for them, and he studied golf courses that are municipally owned and operated, not leased out to a management company or whatever. So there's a precious few. There's only about 15 in the state that are structured the way we are, and they're scattered all over the place. And so everybody's in a different market, and not everybody reports revenue or rounds in the same fashion. So the results that he ended up sending out to everybody who participated in the survey, it's a patchwork. Most golf courses report expenses by department within the golf course, maintenance, golf, food and beverage, etc. We don't. So I think you should be prepared for the fact that the results out of any kind of analysis like that is going to be a little bit inconclusive, because it's not everybody reports the same way, and not everybody's in the same competitive, market.
I will say this, when I hire consultants, I hold them accountable, and it's not a runaway train, and I make sure their pricing is fair depending on the scope of work and what we're asking them to do. So I'm going to manage any consultant very tightly and ensure that, what they do and what scope of work, we're getting the data we want, and Brian and I and Zach will all challenge that to the consultant to get, and it's not just, I don't think it's just limited to just revenue or rates. I think if we're going to do this, we want to look at kind of doing a review of our operation overall, and I've heard several comments tonight. That's why I want to put all that together in a document in writing and bring that back to you guys for all of us to kind of bless it.
may I ask a question?
Yeah.
In terms of a motion, as far as the not to exceed part, do you want that in a motion now, or when you
I would
make
say
the
when I
motion
bring it
now, when
back.
you bring back the scope, then we
Right.
do a more specific
Correct.
in terms of
Yeah.
not to
Yeah.
exceed?
Do you have a motion?
So I will make.
Well, I wanted to say one more thing. Step 2 on this is how we involve you guys in meeting with the selected consultant. So we can meet with you guys individually with the consultant. We can do some kind of committee work. I would suggest that all of us, and I'm just being candid, and all of us are very interested in the golf course and how well it does and what a jewel it is for our community. So I would recommend that we all provide input to the consultant, each one of you individually, and then also the staff. I think we're going to lose something in translation if we work with only 2 board members, and we all have very distinct feelings about what the Gulf Shores should be for the community, and I think I would like the consultant to capture all of that and understand our course and our community holistically, not individually. So that's my personal feeling on that.
Doing it that way, it wouldn't be identical, but it'd be somewhat similar to the way the activity center presentation was handled, where we received information and gave suggestions.
And I have different feelings on the committees for certain topics, but on this one, I think, Brian, I think there's value in the time spent with you guys and having the golf committee do it. So my opinion may change on some other subject relative to committee work, but on this one, I think, we haven't done it in a long time. We've got all the staff that are interested. Brian does a great job. He's going to want to make sure that we continue to do a great job. And we've got all of us who have history and we know how important that course is. I just think in this particular instance, it would be important for the consultant to get input from each of you and hear your perspectives, the policymakers. That's my 2 cents on that.
I mean, from my perspective, it's more about providing the service and meeting the needs of the community than it is revenue, because I don't think we have a revenue problem at the golf course, either golf course. So we look at how we handle.
I think that's consistent with what these guys are saying is, part of that is we don't just want to look at the revenue, we want to look at the service delivery, accessibility, optimization, all of those things, not just limited to rates.
Which is the point I've been trying to make for the last hour, but it also goes to what you're trying to say, Dan, when we originally discussed this. It's why getting input from each board member is helpful, because where someone falls within that scope may vary on the board member and then help all.
Yeah, if you do a golf committee in this instance where it's kind of a global study and we're getting 2 perspectives, it might limit the consultants, it might limit the quality of what we get back from the consultants.
I mean, but keep in mind, none of us play golf regularly.
Well, that's where Brian and I.
Right, that's where Brian's perspective comes into it. The board member's perspective comes into it from a policy standpoint of, where does revenue stand in terms of what's important? Where does access? Who should have that access? That's where the policy matters come into effect. May I go ahead and make the motion then?
So let me just reiterate. So we're going to, Brian and I and Zach are going to put together a scope of work, bring that back in about a month, get you guys to look at that. And then we're going to, once we do that, we'll go out to bid. We'll find a couple consultants to give us prices once you sign off on that. Then after that, once the consultant's engaged, we're going to engage each board member individually as a part of that scope. Okay.
So I'll make the motion that we proceed with the process of hiring a consultant with the staff bringing back a scope of work recommendation, and that ultimately, when hiring the consultant, that the key staff members and all of the board members have input on the scope of work. That's my motion.
And we'll do our best I can on the scope, but you guys will see it. If you want to add to it or take away from it when we bring it back, you can do that.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Let me ask Brian, are you okay with everything? Do you have any suggestions or recommendations on process?
No, it's great. I mean, we know a lot of people who do this kind of work, and the prices will vary depending on the scope of work as discussed. So,
are they local?
Nobody's local. But there are operators in California who do this kind of work. Gene Corian, first one comes to mind. I mean, he does this work on a regular basis. So there are plenty of talented people out there who do that. I mean, they will tell us things that we already know. We know dynamic pricing will increase revenue in prime times. The downside of that is it ruffles feathers in prime time. We know that these things are true already. Credit card guarantee will, ease our no-show rate, but it will also rub people the wrong way if they get, dinged for a no-show once or twice, and so we know these things already. So I think some of the findings that come back will validate things that we already know, and we've kind of chosen to not do for the reasons that we've chosen not to do. But yeah, I'm all for it. I mean, we can absolutely.
Okay, good. But yeah, I just want to make sure Brian was okay with it.
So I made the motion, Kate seconded.
Roll call.
Director Dennert?
Yes.
Director Craig?
Aye.
Treasurer O'Brien?
Yes.
Vice Chair Avila?
Aye.
And Chair Friedman?
Yes.
The motion carries with unanimous vote.
Before we move on to the next item, I understand the motion carried, but I have a question for Brian Hamlet. I spoke to Director Avila about golf fees a couple days ago, or not golf fees, but about this agenda item.
Okay.
And we went back and forth on it and different ideas. But now that we've done that, if we're discussing golf and the scope of work, could I speak to another board member because I spoke to him about this agenda item which has been resolved and we voted in favor? Or would it be considered the same item even though we've already voted on this one?
Oh, no, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be the same item. But you do have the item coming up is the thing I would be concerned about. Right? The scope of work is going to be settled at an upcoming board meeting, right?
Correct. So if I chose to speak to Ed, obviously I could, because I've already done that. But if we're talking about the scope of work next time, and Kate and I want to talk about the scope of work, is that the same item or a different item?
Let me.
I don't know if Kate wants to talk about it.
Because you and Ed have talked about it, I would want to be safe on the safe side. So there may be you talking to another board member that you've already talked, maybe items that weren't even talked about tonight. So I would lean toward being conservative and not talking to another board.
I think at least until the point that your scope of work recommendation is brought back. And then, then after that, we're going to be speaking to you individually anyway.
It sounds a little serial to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
I was mostly thinking like once that's all resolved, if we're meeting at the golf course, not as a committee, but just to listen to staff and look around the operations. If Ed wasn't available a particular day and time, but I understand that.
Okay.
Chair, could we call a brief recess?
I think we settled that. We're on to the next item.
Yeah, Josh is asking for a
Josh wants
recess.
I just want to say, I know Dan for meeting with me, Brian, I do want to say thank you to both of you. I think it's an important issue, and I appreciate all of your input and all of your work on it.
You're welcome.
Josh, let's take a quick break.
Yeah.
We're good, Josh.
We'll
Josh, we're going to take 5 minutes.
We'll be back at 8:03. Call the meeting back to order. Our next item is approval of award of contract for the Knowles Station parking lot renovation project.
Thank you, Chair. Wayne's going to give the report, and then I'm going to have some comments about this item after Wayne concludes.
Okay. Chair Freeman, members of the board, at its meeting on November 1st, 2023, the Board of Directors authorized staff to solicit bids for the Knowles Station parking lot renovation project. Notice inviting bids was published in the Ventura County Star on November 5th. A total of 10 contractors picked up plans and specifications for the project. On December 19th, bids were opened. We received 3 bids. They're listed in your staff report. The apparent lowest responsive bidder is, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Agile Corporation, DBA Lee Construction of Simi Valley, California. I'm going to call them Lee Construction. Lee Construction has previous experience working for the Park District in completing both large and small projects for the Park District throughout the last 20 years. Most recently, you'll know that Lee Construction successfully completed the Old Canyon Community Park Lagoon renovation project. Staff is confident in Lee Construction's ability to complete this smaller project for the Park District. Based on the combined total of the base bid and the alternate bid, and allowing for a 10% contingency for extra work or modifications to the contract during the course of construction, the estimate construction total for the project is approximately $240,383. Partial funding for this project is identified in the district's budget under the grant funds in the amount of $95,000. These funds were obtained by the Park District through the State of California's per capita grant program, Prop 68, back in April of 2022. Additional funds necessary to complete this project can be derived from the district's capital improvement project or reserve fund built into the district's budget for such occurrences. Based on the bid prices received, staff is recommending that the board consider awarding a contract for the Knowles parking lot renovation project to the Aljewel Corporation, DBA Lee Construction of Simi Valley, in the amount of $218,530. Considering the significant amount of capital improvement project fund reserves needed to complete this project, staff is also requesting that the board Consider and discuss the overall value of the project and the priority of the project itself. Board action requests are consider and discuss awarding a contract to the Anju Corporation, DBA Construction for the Mill Station Parking Lot Renovation Project in the amount of $218,530, including a discussion of the overall value of the project itself and the priority of the project itself. Consider authorizing the district manager to execute an agreement on behalf of the Park District with the awarded contractor, and to allow for contingencies in an amount not to exceed $21,853, which is 10% of the contract value, if and when we need extra work or for modifications to the contract. We also I have to ask for you to consider authorizing the district manager to amend the district's budget to allocate $145,383 from the Capital Improvement Project Fund Reserve to the Mill Station Parking Lot Renovation Project. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Now, if I could share, do we have a photo of the parking lot the site we can put up, Alex? So as Alex puts that up, so this project a number of years ago, I want to say 4 years ago, was brought up during the budget workshop, and Wayne and I actually had it funded in the workshop. At that time, the board, looking at other priorities and other projects, had decided that we could live with the parking lot in the state that it was in. That being said, not shortly thereafter, we had a grant opportunity which I could get some grant money rather than locally sourced money to complete the project, and we submitted this parking lot as a part of that grant. At the time, I think it was over 3 years ago now, the budget estimate was $95,000 to pave this parking lot. We're now 3 years later, and the bids came in at $218,000. So that being said, that's why Wayne and I put in the staff report, consider the value and the priority of the project, because there's some history to this with the board. I did talk to the staff regarding usage, and I'll have them weigh in if the board has any questions. But that we do anticipate that we'll have this facility. So in the lower, next to the red there is the old fire station. Down below the parking lot is a Quonset hut. The Quonset hut is where we used to have the preschool program before the school district starting their pre-K program. And then it also supports the baseball field there. Anecdotally from the staff, they tell me that this parking lot is heavily used. I would think over the course of time that we will activate this site more as we grow and have more programs, and that Quonset hut will be used. So it is a value call. The staff generally felt like the parking lot is used. And that it would be worth, and we expect it's a district asset, they thought it might be worth putting the extra money in it to get the project done. It's only going to get more expensive. Apparently Zach had some comments from folks that have people from the neighborhood and elsewhere have said, when are you guys going to pave this thing? So we've had the, one or two kind of off comments on that. So it's really a value discussion. The staff and I kind of talked about it and kind of thought, well, if this is an asset we're going to have it a long time, it might be worth paving this parking lot. Next to the baseball field there where you see the road, in there, that's where you can see, I think there's a car there. That's where some people are parking to access the baseball field. That is also dirt, and it's right along the roadway. My understanding also is this parking lot does get quite a bit of use. So that being said, we have a bid. It's $140,000 of locally sourced money, and it's really a value judgment on the board's part and whether or not we want to move forward with this project.
Questions of staff?
I have a couple of questions. We did the grant proposal based on, asked for money to fix this parking lot. We got it.
Correct.
What happens if we don't use that money? Is there a deadline or do we have to give it back?
So the grant was actually the per capita grant, which was supposed to bring us more funding for parks in the state. We actually ended up only getting about $240,000. So we took the couple so there's a playground also for this park in that project. So we took the playground and the parking lot and made the grant request, which was $240,000. So relative to, we are already on an extension for this. I think because it's the per capita grant and we're supposed to get that anyways, we could be successful in repurposing the 95 to something else, but I can't say that for sure until we make a request to the state to repurpose it. So I can't say that for sure.
I have another question about the ADA ramp to the Quonset hut. Is that really optional, or are we required to do that?
I'll let Wayne answer that.
Are we legally required to do that?
No, we could do without it, which is the alternate bid. It just finishes off the parking lot itself. There is no way to get anybody who's handicapped parking in that parking lot down to the park site itself. There's a 3-foot difference in elevation.
Okay.
That ramp would also facilitate easier access to the Quonset hut.
That being said, Kid, I think what you're saying, Wayne, is from a legal perspective, there's other handicap parking spots on site that you could meet the legal requirement. But if someone were handicapped and wanted to use that and it's closer, it would be it would be easier for them. But I don't think we need to do it for a legal requirement because there are other handicap places over there. Is that right, Wayne?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay, and my final question is there any value in restructuring the bid as sort of a line item bid so we can like pick and choose what we want to work, what we really need to work on and what we don't?
We have individual line items in the proposal.
Oh, we do? Okay.
Yeah, we did. It's easier to bid it as a lump sum. That way any mistakes is on the contractor's fault. If we put in 30 feet of concrete curb and there's actually 40 feet design, we get into an argument. So we do a lot of it lump sum.
So it could benefit us in some scenarios, but it could hurt us if we do that in other scenarios. Mostly with an increasing cost environment, it usually ends up, we end up on the short of the stick on those type of contracts.
All right.
Director Evelyn?
Yeah, I asked this question in the context of when we were discussing Rancho Santa Susana Park, and I pointed out that in terms of priority, the parking lot there could be a lower priority than the rest of the park. So in that context, how usable is this parking lot?
I think it's been used for a number of years.
So
it gets muddy, it's inconvenient, it doesn't look good.
Little diagram back up. This parking lot is used for 2 purposes. One for the softball fields, because there's not enough parking along the street. We don't own the street parking area. The green line is the boundary of the park. What this will actually do is help facilitate the fire station. We got a 4,500 square foot fire station. The parking behind the fire station can accommodate maybe 10, 12 cars at the most. If somebody wanted to have a party there, they're parking up and down the streets. This could open up a lot more rentals than what that place is being used for. I'm looking towards providing easier access for the fire station. And the side benefit is parking for the baseball field.
Sir, if I could, Wayne, that raises an issue. So the park boundary is the green line.
Yeah.
So in effect, the only parking lot we have to support our own property is this dirt parking lot, because we're relying on street parking, which technically isn't ours. So this is the parking lot, our parking lot that we own for this site. That's a good point.
Wayne, when you were talking about rentals, the loss of income on rentals is because people don't want to do an event because it's a dirt lot?
Well, a lot of them don't, because especially when it's muddy, you got to park back there, you got to walk to your mud to the facility itself. There is a gravel base that we put down there to help alleviate the mud, but it's only going to last for a little while. I like this facility. I think it's a great building. That's why I'm probably more pro on finishing off this parking lot than anybody else is, because it would be a great benefit to the Park District.
Back to Ed's point, but it is true, we've used this parking lot in dirt conditions for a number of years, just like the other one. This will be $140,000 in our budget that we won't have for something else.
Just a follow-up to Brian's question, I mean, how do we know that it's keeping people from renting it? Are people telling us that? Are we assuming that? How do we know that?
Well, the only way I know that is when I don't get calls for renting the facility. I get the aftermarket or after complaints. They held a party out there recently. The complaint is, why do we have to park back here? It's wet, it's muddy. They decided to park in the street. on front of people's homes on the next street down, and I got the complaints from the residents, especially the Reverend, but those 2 houses down, saying all your people are parking in front of my house. It just occurred when we did have a rental during the rain.
Dan, I mean, for this extra cost, I mean, even if it would mean more rentals, I mean, how long is it realistically going to take to get that kind of money back?
I'm gonna ask Zach to weigh in on the rental activity at that site. It's a little bit complicated by the fact we were running a preschool there and we're not now. So I'll let Zach weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take a while at our current rates to recoup $140,000 out of that site. There's no doubt about that. The feedback I get is that baseball practices and the leagues that run kind of out of that park would like to see this done for access reasons. I think the rental is a little underutilized. I think we could do a little bit better there with better access and better, better amenity there. That being said, it's surely at the board's discretion to determine how much and how far they'd like to go to see that be paved. We do some private rentals in that building. There's some groups that meet regularly there. And so it is activated, but it's not what I would say its capacity. If we had a better lot, we'd probably get a little bit more rentals, but to your point, it would take a while to recoup that money.
And for the Quonset hut, Dan, you hinted at that we might be trying to use it more? What was that like?
That's just if we grow and we get, some of our marketing works and we get more contractors on board. That being said, we've got a lot of new space here we want to activate too. So
yeah.
I would say the Quonset hut is a spot where a niche program or something unique could fit there on that end of town. I wouldn't say that we have an exact plan on how we're going to use that.
No, the staff sees that as an opportunity, as a location to expand some programming ultimately, some daytime and after school programming potentially. We've been a little slow to move in that direction just because we're kind of looking at the realities of the preschool programs and the after school programs that are kind of, absorbing a lot of the kids at this point. But it is an opportunity location to do more programming and to potentially get a few more rentals.
Wayne, for people with mobility issues, where do they park now?
In the front parking lot of the fire station.
So right in front of it.
Right in front of it,
Yeah.
we have built a handicap ramp from the fire station to the ball fields.
Director Gray, did you have a question?
No, not at this time.
Wayne, when did we acquire this?
The fire station? Or?
About 10 years ago?
Yeah, I can't exactly remember the date, but about 10 years ago, we got it from the city of Simi Valley for $1.
So if I can get a little bit of anecdotal history that I'm aware about, the county fire department built the new fire station. The city actually acquired the property initially, the old fire station. One thought at the time was the city was going to activate this for a veterans center that's been around in the community. They went through the permitting issues, what the veterans wanted to use it for, the impact of a veterans center in the middle of that neighborhood, the parking, and they decided that was probably not a good spot for the veterans center. Once that happened, the city said, okay, we don't really have a use for it. Park district, we're going to give it to you so you can, use it for a park district, highest and best use. So.
Well, even going before that, we were aggressively trying to get control of the fire station as a community center for that neighborhood.
And that's what we have.
And then the city came forward and sort of outbid us, you might say.
Didn't know that.
But we had been working with the fire district to get the building to begin with. And then it went to the city, and then the city.
It functions like Burrowwood or Houghton, or we
Right.
have those outbuildings where people are using Houghton, people are using Burrowwood for different programs.
Right.
This is another building that we have available for public use and community use. And we'll rent it to local neighborhood groups or Rotaries or any, there's other groups using it. So that's the benefit of it is, it's a small neighborhood community center, call it,
And I think we have to give some consideration to the surrounding neighborhood. The street parking, I don't know if you've been to the games up there opening days, but it gets a little dicey trying to get a parking place. Director Gray, did you say you didn't have any questions?
No, none at this time. I think my only question for Dan, which I don't know is structured enough to get an answer, would be how does an extra 140,000 out of the capital budget, how does that impact the other priorities that we've said are our top priorities? I would say,
Yeah.
well, I view this as a need. I don't see it, usurping the priorities list I've already shared.
What's going to happen from a practical perspective is we've got a lot of projects budgeted right now and a lot of money planned. We set aside an additional amount like we talked about because of price increases as a safeguard for overruns on those projects and those things. So Josh, as a practical matter, what's going to happen is once we get all those projects done, it's going to fall out at the end of we ran out of money out of the reserve funds, which means we won't have it for something else. So you're right, it's hard for me to answer that now because we have so many active capital projects that are budgeted that we don't know how much they're going to cost. We're also going to get new capital money and new grants and other things like that. So, it's coming out of our fund balance basically to do this project, the extra amount. That's a little bit wishy-washy, but at the same time, I can't ultimately say how much it's going to impact our existing priorities. I will know we'll be 145 less. I'm trying to get all those other projects completed. So.
Actually, can I follow up on Josh's question? Because that's actually an excellent question. So I guess the question I would have, because I certainly haven't heard it in any board meetings or, to be honest with you, anywhere else, in terms of the push to have this parking lot here compared to other projects that we have prioritized, where we've clearly heard from large numbers of people in the public. I mean, how much are we really hearing from the public on this in relation to those other projects?
I myself, and I'm going to ask the staff too, as a matter of priority, I have not heard a lot from other people in the neighborhood as compared to pickleball and activity center and more soccer fields and playgrounds and stuff. So that's me personally. I have not personally received a huge push on this, but I'll ask Zach and Wayne, have they got a big push from the community for this parking lot?
No, I have not received any phone calls regarding, we haven't advertised it either. We haven't told the community we're doing this project. The only comments I get, like I said, is on the aftermath of a rental or after it rains. I've never got a request to put this parking lot in.
I think this is more, we have certain parks that are undone. We got the piece at Madera, we got this little parking lot that's optimally, we'd have it paved. Out in Schreiber, I think there's some areas over there that we, by a master plan perspective, we'd like to improve that, make it nicer. So I think this is more about trying to complete our projects and our properties and make them nice. But this isn't the only one. We've got others that, are what I would say not completely done. So this is one that popped on the radar. We don't have a parking lot here, so I think it's more from that perspective that it came up than probably what I'm hearing from a community push.
Yeah, if I could just add, I think that's true what both Wayne and Dan have said. We get a little bit of comments when people come to rent, where do we have to park? Can we park there? Do we get our money back if it rains and we can't get into the building? Those type of things, but I don't know that it's fundamentally changed the bottom line as to people ultimately turning away or losing revenue. It's more so, it's not much nicer to have a paved parking lot, as we all know, but I don't know that it's hurting the bottom line.
So I would say, this is my last comment, if you were to look at this site against our others, you might grade this site a B- or something, because, you know what I mean? So if we did this parking lot, it may get a B+ grade or something like that. It's just improving the look, touch, and feel, and making it more useful without mud and rain, and then kind of helping the neighborhood so we don't get people spilling out.
If that's all the questions of the board, I'll open it for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience? Is there anyone on Zoom that comments on this item?
I don't see anybody on Zoom, Chair.
Okay, then I will close the public hearing. I think it's if we improve it and improve the parking lot, will we get more use out of it? I think it will look more finished, and I think it will look more usable with the parking lot and the access. I mean, it is an unfinished project, the way it is right now. Director Evelyn?
Yeah, I have a real problem with it. I think Zach just kind of concluded the way I'm seeing it. The complaints about it are minimal. Any revenue impact to us is minimal. It certainly isn't going to make up for the cost. As Dan pointed out, we have unfinished projects all over the district. I made mention of a number of things at our year-end meeting last year about where we're just throwing out things to spend money on, and there may be, there may be more important items that come along in the future, and then the money's not there for them. We may not even finish all of the things that are higher on the priority list at this point. So it's really tough to justify. If the board does approve it, I mean, it would be way down on my priority list, just because it's all relative to the amount of money we have as a district, and it's all relative to the other projects we have out there and the public demand for those projects.
Director Denham?
I think eventually we might need to do it, but I don't see the cost-benefit analysis, and it doesn't go to our core mission. I can't say any more calories would be burnt if we did it, or, I mean, I'm sure you have to park in a dirt parking lot. That's not preferable. But what I wouldn't like to do is to pave this parking lot and find out we have to not finish the equestrian center and do it at a lower level. If we run out of funds for another project priority. So I think it'd be nice if it would happen, but we have some other priorities that I see as higher up, so I would be against it.
Director Gray?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say I have a lot of personal history at this park. I love this park. I went there in after school clubs. My grandfather was a firefighter in the fire station when it was active. I became a Cub Scout and started my whole Boy Scout journey in that firehouse. I love it. And I also can't see how we could justify dedicating this amount of funds when we have much larger priority projects that I would feel, a lot more embarrassed, or, I would just feel like we failed our job if we don't get those done, where this one is, it's a nice to have. I'd like to see it eventually, but it's just not a priority.
Director O'Brien?
I would tend to concur. I don't think this one is a real priority. And it's true, it's cost more 3 years, like 3 years ago it was $95,000, and now it's what is it, 218. Well, it's true of every other project we've got on our list. They're all going to be more expensive too. My only concern is, I mean, the only reason I would want to consider it is because I worry about that if that grant was based on getting the parking lot done.
Yeah, let me ask a couple questions. Do we need to vote to reject this bid, Wayne? Okay, so what I would ask for is a motion to reject the bid if that's where it's heading, and then also direct staff to do all it can to repurpose the $95,000 to another priority park district project that's already on the list.
I would feel a lot more.
I don't know. We'll do our best to do that. We have a good relationship with our grant advisor, so I'm sure they'll understand that it's that much more than we originally thought, and it's the per capita grant. So I think, in my mind, I think we should have a pretty good chance of repurposing the 95 to another project that's on higher on the priority list.
This is a perfect example of inflation.
Yeah.
Yes, and why we put it off, and look what happened. Yes.
That sound good, Brian?
So do I have a motion?
Motion to reject the bid and direct staff to repurpose the $95,000 grant money to another higher priority project.
I will make a motion to reject the bids and then redirect staff, or ask staff to look into redirecting the funds.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Jennerz.
Yes.
Director Gray. Director O'Brien.
Yes.
Vice Chair Avila.
Aye.
Chair Freeman.
Yes.
The motion carries with unanimous vote.
I did have one comment. it alludes to what I said before. This is making me even more bold about thinking we should separate the parking lot project at Rancho San Susana from the rest of the project.
And Wayne, if anyone gives you a hard time, please ask them to blame me personally for paving the parking lot, not you.
I'll tell him Brian Dennett's willing to put out the car wash tickets.
Sounds good.
Next item, approval of the 2024 Board of Directors standing committee list.
Thank you, Chair. Each year we go through an exercise of adopting our committee assignments. There are a few recommended changes on here that I work with the chair on. Those are identified in red line in your packet, and with that, that concludes staff's report. We're open for any changes the board may want or adopting the list as proposed.
Any questions of the board?
I have several quick questions. I just want to know what the status is. What is the status of the Murphy estate?
We are still waiting for the project design that we're working on in Santa Sue. So the idea was to use that money to potentially supplement the Santa Sue project and then name the park potentially after Pat. So once we know that, we'll be having a meeting with the city to talk about how we jointly use, I think it's $650,000 to put into a project as she had wished.
All right, and the second one, what is the status? I thought it was done. What is the status of the task force on heroin subcommittee?
The task force on heroin is still active. I asked that, I wouldn't say it's active, it's still on the city's list. So I've always said if it's still on the city's list, I know they've talked about getting rid of it, but it's still on their list as of now. They did get rid of a couple other, I think they got rid of their homeless committee, but this one is still on their list. It hasn't been active though from a meeting standpoint, but so it's still on the city's list.
Any other? Excuse me.
No, go ahead.
No, I just was going to ask if there were other questions.
Yeah, I'm still going. The next thing, and I want to qualify this with the understanding that I'm not a fan of this whole committee list, and I still, to me, some of the standing committees are really liaison committees anyway. But what I do view this list as is more of a public perception in terms of what we're doing. Would it make sense, and I don't really care, like I say, the standing and liaison thing doesn't really mean much to me, but would it make sense now that we've decided that we're going to put an emphasis on mental health and that Josh and I, depending on his health and our schedules, will either meet with you individually or together, would it make sense to have a mental health one where Josh and I are on there, and so that it's recognized that we're focusing on mental health?
I would prefer to have the mental health issue brought back as an agenda item, and we look at the options on, as a board, what could be done, since we're not a social service agency, and how we can utilize sports and recreation as mental health.
Well, that wasn't the question.
The question is, once it's a standing committee, it becomes a Brown Acted committee, so that would be one consideration. It's subject to the Brown Act. The other consideration, the board can do whatever they want. The other option would be to embed the mental health in one of the other committees. But you're right, then that you and Josh aren't on there. So it's really your guys' call. We can work with you informally on that as kind of an ad hoc, the two of you, or we can formalize it.
So with the understanding that it's I think at least the majority of the board thinks it's something we should be emphasizing, we can always, again, I view this list more as a perception list, as a reality list. It's something we could add on here at any point.
Correct.
Okay.
It's the total board's prerogative if you want to add a committee.
Right. I mean, I think it would be a good idea, and I think it would send a good, clear message to the public. So I think it would be a good idea, but.
And what I might suggest is that once we scope out what our role in that's going to be, once you guys meet with them and kind of see what we're already doing and what role, if you want it to be an ongoing role and continue, you could ask this list to come back at any time during the year if you'd like to.
Right. It's just a thought. I mean, I think compared to some of this other stuff, it's much more important. But and then The only other comment that I had, I guess this would be a question for the board more than it would you, Dan. But I did go down, and again, I don't differentiate. I looked at the standing and liaison committees, and I noticed that Director Freeman is on 11 of them, and others are on substantially less. I mean, would it make sense if there's interest in having some of the other board members on some of the other committees? And just as an example, I know now it's been several years, so I have no idea what the stance is now. I know several years ago, many times, Director Dennert mentioned to me his interest in the Historical Society. There's any number of them. I certainly, I mean, I'm already, I'll be speaking about MLK Day during my board member comments, but I'm already speaking with Anthony Angelini of the Chamber about the MLK Day and, making it even more expansive in the future in ways that we can improve that. So I certainly would have interest in the community nonprofit liaison in one of those spots. And I will point out, if anyone's interested, I know I have the backup role on Santa Monica Conservancy. If anyone's interested in that, I'm certainly willing to give that up.
Any other questions? No. I'll just say if it's your desire to be on that, that would be fine with me.
That would be the community nonprofit?
I have some input on that, but I want to wait till after we go to public comment, which I doubt there is any, but.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address this issue? Seeing none, I'll go to Zoom. Is there anyone on Zoom that would want to comment?
I do not see any, Chair.
With that, I will close the public comment period.
So Ed, listening to what you're requesting, I'm looking at specifically a couple things. The first one is the Oak Park Committee. That's for our advisory committee. I know that we are addressing in more detail in a future point, but we are discussing committees, so we're free to discuss that. My inclination and my opinion of it is the committee no longer needs to exist. In our last Oak Park Committee meeting, a few of the members were absent. One of them let us know that they were going to be absent, and none of them heavily objected to eliminating the committee. Some of them had suggestions for improving the committee, but nobody said, did I remember that this is a must? And would you agree with that? Like nobody spoke up, so we have to?
I was gonna discuss that in my board member comments. I just want to make sure, because I don't want to get pushback from Oak Park. Are we able to discuss that in detail right now or not?
Let me take a step back.
Because I'd be glad to, because
I was going to brief the other board members in my comments as well. So now that it's come up here, we did discuss this we can talk about this because it's on the committee list, correct?
Correct.
The Oak Park Committee, yeah.
Yes. Great.
So we did have a pretty detailed, I won't say detailed, we had a lengthy conversation about the Oak Park Committee. We kind of pro-conned the value of the committee from a structural perspective and its effectiveness. We got feedback from them. We also talked about the committee and fairness and equity relative to when we get a District 5 board member elected. So through that conversation, there was 5 board members there, and there was one that was not. All of them, and we did have a nice philosophical discussion about the value of it. All of them felt like they understood and were accepting of us not having that committee anymore, the committee members. That included Harry Medved, who we talked to later. They did ask us to make sure that we had a community outreach effort in place to hear from the community, which there's a lot of ways to do that short of having a committee. But generally, I would say a majority of the members understood the arguments for and against and all of that, and all of them were in concurrence that maybe the Oak Park Committee was useful for a number of years and maybe a number of years before that, but looking to the future. The other thing we talked about is the availability of Zoom. So if you go back 10, 15 years, the only way you could access the Park District in your committee was through that committee. And then the board going out there. But we also talked about, with the advent of Zoom, anybody can directly beam in to you guys and talk to the board members directly. So that was a part of the conversation. So I think that's just a little bit of background for the rest of you that weren't there.
Dan, would this be fair to say?
Yeah.
If we choose to just not discuss, not
So that
appoint anybody
if I-
tonight, we could bring it back.
Well, I'm already planning to bring it back, and I think it is as a follow-up or a separate item. I would think that we should probably, in the interest of, and I did tell them that when we had that discussion, we'd be inviting them. So I would think we'd want to bring it back as a separate
Oh, I
item.
apologize to clarify, I'm saying, if tonight we just said we're not appointing anybody to that committee, but if we wanted to, in the future, we could.
Well, one of the questions I'm going to have for you next month is, do we want to keep the committee until we get a new District 5 person elected?
I think,
So-
I think that is part of the,
I would
that is
keep it
part
for
of the
now.
problem in
Yeah.
terms of what the timing is going to be. And I will say this, because I kind of agree with almost everything Director Denner just said here. Even if it looks, even if from a technical standpoint it may make sense to keep it until December, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to continue meeting at this point either. So since I can talk about it, I will then respond to what Director Denner was saying. Yeah, there wasn't really any pushback from the committee. I think the main thing there was the emphasis that in some form communication continue, and that goes without saying. The other thing I have to tell you that was troubling, and Dan, well, first of all, Dan mentioned the Zoom point, and I've emphasized that a lot. I emphasized it at the committee meeting, and I emphasized it at, probably was it our last meeting or one of the meetings, is that Zoom kind of changed the whole picture. And one of the things that we were finding out is that the residents, when they wanted to come and as a community make their point, it was being done more effectively at our board meetings on Zoom than it was at the Oak Park Committee. The Oak Park Committee, whatever term you want to use for it, dealt with the pickleball tennis issue initially. They didn't weigh in on districting, and those were the two biggest issues for Oak Park last year, and the community as a whole, people I hadn't heard from or seen before, were appearing either in person or even more so on Zoom. And I think that shows, even apart from the whole fact that there's going to be an elected member that's representing Oak Park, I think that kind of shows that the committee outlived its usefulness. I think another point I was going to emphasize, I'll do it now instead of in board member comments, but also in terms of how the committee has lost its way and isn't representing the community interests in a whole, but sometimes just individual committee members' interests. At the last Oak Park Committee meeting, which I guess was just last week, there was one Oak Park Committee member that placed 5 items on the agenda. At least 3 or 4 of those are items that didn't belong on any sort of agenda, whether it was our board agenda or an Oak Park Committee agenda, and I think were probably being used as a way to try to attack Dan or Zach or Sandra, and really had no business on any committee meeting. The other ones that committee member placed on the agenda were things that have been discussed and would be discussed at some other point. But the whole point I want to make here is I prepared for those items anyway. I didn't speak to Director Denner about it, but based on his comments at the meeting, he spent a lot of time preparing on those items, which means that I'm assuming the staff spent exponentially more time preparing on those items. That committee member did not even show up for the meeting. That is outrageous, and I think that for me was an exclamation point on what I was already thinking. And then there's the other obvious concerns about if Oak Park has a committee, then why doesn't Wood Ranch? If Oak Park and Wood Ranch have committees, then why don't communities in all of the other districts have committees? And it's just an endless cycle. And when we do finally make the decision, there's really 3 questions I think we should ask. 1 is, what is best for the entire district? 2, what is best for all of the residents of Oak Park, not just several of them that sit on a committee? And 3, what is best for our staff? And if we look at it objectively, I think you're going to find out that the answer to all of those questions is the same.
So for tonight, I just suggest, although we've shared our opinions on that, that we just don't appoint anybody to the Oak Park Committee, remove it from the list. But at a future meeting, if we discuss it with community input and we're convinced we need this committee, then we can appoint people. Then, like, we could appoint 2 of us if we decide.
So tonight we're keeping the standing committee, but we're not going to appoint members to it.
that would be my suggestion, because I know you're going to report back and you're going to let the committee know by the committee members, you told them there'd be a report back at the next meeting, and so we'll listen to any future input. But for tonight, we don't need to appoint anybody to that committee.
So those 3 members that are on until, how long is their term?
January.
This January or next
Yeah,
year?
this January.
This January. Is everybody's term over in January?
That's part of our next discussion, is the timing of this. So
Now that's where I'm going.
if you guys want to talk about that now, we might be able to do that, or we can save that when I bring the guys back.
I suggest that, although I have strong feelings on it and super want to discuss it, that we wait off a little bit, just because some of the committee members, although they're open to different ideas, they thought that we'd probably do that in more detail in a future meeting.
Brian, I think, yeah, I agree with that, but I think if I actually agree with what you just said. I think the safe thing to do, though, even though deep inside I like what else you were saying, I think the safe thing to do, though, is to leave members on that committee right now. Otherwise, it's going to look like we predetermined the issue.
So
I would agree with that on that.
Yeah. So yeah, if you guys decide to keep the committee through the end of the year and we put TBDs in here, I'm gonna have to bring back another item to put names in here. That we'll have to bring this committee list back.
Even if we don't keep it till the end of the year, we can just remove the committee. If we choose to remove it right for the committee right away, we can remove the committee from the list right away.
I agree with that.
I don't have strong feelings on that. I only suggested it because, Ed, I know you were doing a count of our board member participation committees. And I'd hate to say, well, Ed, you're on that committee, and then 2 weeks later, the committee doesn't exist, so.
Don't worry about that.
We'll put that in a different
Don't
count.
worry about that.
My other suggestion was, Ed mentioned mental health as a priority of his, and I could see that as community nonprofit and working with the chamber. I can also see that as special events, and I have a suggestion for that. I do like to be on special events, but if this works, it could be Ed switches to special events with Josh, and Josh switches to Santa Monica and open space with me, and then that gives an opportunity. But if we want to do it as community nonprofit, I kind of see it as a special event, but I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate your efforts to expand that day, so I'm good with either one.
I don't want to take special events away from Josh, because I have to be honest with you. I think he's a member of another chamber. He has more. I think it'd be foolish for me to think I have more expertise in special events than Josh does. So I wouldn't want to remove Josh from special events.
So what about this suggestion for special events? I would step off of it so you could be on it, and then that way, if you guys want to do mental health, it could be through the special events committee.
I think that, yeah, or we can deal with that once we discuss the mental. It doesn't really matter to me. Would you? I mean, it doesn't. I just think that I wanted to see, again, I'm not a whole fan of this list anyway, again, just to emphasize that, but if we're going to have the list, I wanted to see mental health be identified on that list. And if we're not ready to do it tonight, then maybe we can do it after we discuss mental health. I just think it's important to have it on there. I think it's a lot more important than some of these other things. So I just wanted to see it, if we're gonna have a list, I wanted to see it identified, that's all. So I think that's more important to me than whether it fits into another committee. I think it has its own. I think it has its own meaning.
So just to be clear, what changes are you making to this list?
After you hear me say that, I didn't have any suggested changes to the special events or community nonprofit, but I would suggest that we just eliminate the task force on heroin. I feel like it makes us look like we're doing something, but we're not. If the city activates the committee and reaches out to us, we can have the chair and vice chair go, or we can recreate it. But as long as I've been on the park board, I never remember us meeting with them. And
I think we
haven't met for years. No, it's, I think it predates you.
yeah, so it's been 5 or 6 years. We could just eliminate it, bring it back, never meet.
I will say this, if any member of the public ever looked at this list, I think they'd be a lot more impressed to see that there's mental health liaisons than there are task force on heroin subcommittee liaisons.
They might be impressed with it, but if it doesn't do anything, that's the worst side.
Brian, not disagreeing with you, just another perspective, that it's a city committee and they asked us to be a part of the committee. So if it's still on the city list and we eliminate it, we're kind of, and I get the practical side of it too. Yeah, it's really up to you guys.
I mean, it's not hurting anything just being here. And if it gets activated.
I'm arguing a little bit
we
that
have
it
the
is because
structure
we're pretending we're
for
doing
having
something.
it here.
Here's a suggestion, we could possibly bring it up with the city and suggest we sort of morph from the heroin task force into a mental health committee, because it's all kind of related.
So I don't agree with that. I think mental health needs its own place, and if to the comment that it doesn't hurt it being there, then what would it hurt having mental health there, and listing Josh and I as liaisons to that? I don't get it. I don't see what the deterrent is to that.
So we're creating.
I don't like the word committee. I listed under liaison. That's the way I would do it.
But that would be a liaison to who?
My only point with mental health, that makes it a Brown Acted meeting, and we haven't scoped out what effort we want to give that yet. So that's the only reason why you wait on mental health until you guys give us direction on how you want to scope.
But it doesn't have to meet as a Brown Active committee. I mean,
if it's on the list, it's a standing committee, and we'll have to Brown Act.
Right.
okay.
If it's not on the list, it's an informal.
Okay. I see what you're
staff
saying.
working
So
group.
we can hold off on it.
Standing committees under the Brown Act. If you have a standing committee adopted list, we have to Brown Act it.
Well, what if you put it under the liaison list?
That's a good question.
Liaison to who? Is my question. Usually a liaison is to another, to another committee.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, under that scenario though, shouldn't historical, Oak Park,
Those are all
shouldn't
those are all good points. Yes.
Yeah, shouldn't they be under liaison? I mean, those are liaisons things. The whole point I'm trying to make, the whole way we're doing this doesn't make sense. But we had a busy year last year, and Dan and I were going to talk about it last year. I guarantee Dan and I will talk about it this year. So we can hold off on the mental health thing. I think everyone's agreeable then that I would be on the community nonprofit. And I just wanted to indicate I do think there's a clear imbalance in terms of how the committees are, and I just was curious if anybody else had any interest in any of the other committees. I expressed mine that I think we should do mental health in some form at some point, and I am interested in the community nonprofit.
So what I'm hearing is that it's the list as presented, other than amended to add Ed in the place of Elaine on community nonprofit.
That's the only change I saw.
That's that's what I got out of that.
And that mental health will be considered at a later time. And that you and I will talk about how to go forward in the future with this list at a future time.
Is there a motion to approve it as?
Before we make that motion, I would like to eliminate the task force on heroin subcommittee. Here's the harm I see. If somebody looks at this list, or as Ed, as you mentioned, it shows our priorities and our involvement. If somebody looks at this list, it says, oh, the park district's working on heroin prevention, which we are absolutely not. The city could say, oh, look at the bold stand we're taking, but if it's not meeting.
Why don't we have the city task force? Let's clarify that it's not Park District Task Force, it's a city task force. City of Simi Valley Task Force.
We can't eliminate it because it's not our committee.
I don't want to see it on the list anymore unless
Right.
we're doing something.
I'm going to weigh in. I agree with Brian. I think the rest of it is all semantics. I think it's, for that to be on the list and mental health not to be on the list is just, we're skewing our priorities. So I'm just going to weigh in. I agree with Brian.
But it's not saying mental health won't be on the list, it's just not ready to be on the list. So if we clarify and say City of Simi Valley Task Force.
I still concur with Brian.
Well, I mean, it shows it's not ours, it's theirs.
Well, I'm sure there's like good work that county does that we're not involved in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying that if you're concerned about saying what we're doing when we're not taking the lead, we're not the city.
So I think what we would do here is a motion to adopt the committee list as amended to include Ed and the community nonprofit, and to eliminate the task force on heroin, and we'd take a vote on that. If that fails, then we'd have a second motion that does that but does not eliminate the task force on heroin.
So I just want to indicate this, so that Brian's life is made easier. If you make a motion, I'm not going to second it. But it's not because I disagree with you. I agree with you. I'm not going to second it because on principle, I don't want to be a part of any motion that deals with this list. So I just want to make that clear. I fully agree with you on the issue. So if there's someone else who agrees with us on this issue who will second your motion,
Would
I
somebody
will
like to
vote
make
for
a
it.
motion beside Director Evelyn?
I would like to make a motion that we adopt the committee list for the next year with a noting that we'll deal with mental health as a committee possibly in the future. And that the task force and heroin subcommittee, it's a City of Simi Valley subcommittee, but it won't appear on our list unless it's activated, and we can bring that back.
And that Ed replaces Elaine on the community nonprofit liaison committee.
If, Elaine, were you open to that, the last part? Were you open to Ed replacing you on the community nonprofit, or did you have anything you want?
Right. But I want to be clear, I could still participate in the chamber and the legislative committee.
Of course, and just so, I didn't want to get into a detailed discussion. I mean, just for example, I know because I've contacted, I mean,
Well, I mean,
we can all go to VCSDA meetings. That's why these lists are just a little,
I mean, I've been.
the whole thing is convoluted. Yes, of course you can, and just like I can attend a VC SDA meeting, but, so again, that's why, I'm not a fan of these lists to begin with, so, yeah, I mean.
You can, it's just if 3 of you went to that, you've got to be very careful about
Right.
making park
Right.
district decisions or representing the park
Right.
district if there are 3 of you at that particular
Right, but
meeting.
there's nothing precluding me from doing it, so.
I mean,
Yeah.
if it's a social event or a conference that
Yeah.
we're not discussing business, district
Well,
business.
all of you can do that stuff,
No,
even if you're on
no,
the
as,
lister.
as a First Amendment matter, anybody can attend as an observer, even if they're not part of a quote committee. So that's actually, the statement's actually not accurate. It doesn't have to just be a social event.
So would you like to repeat your motion, please?
You were open to that, switching on the community nonprofit? Then I would like to make a motion to adopt the committee list for 2024 with not having listed any more in the heroin subcommittee and switching Ed and Elaine on the community nonprofit.
And potentially
Wait a
considering
second,
mental health.
And mental health will come back to us in the future.
Who is Ed replacing on the community nonprofit? Elaine? Or-
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Is that good?
you're okay with that? Okay. I would still like to stay on that committee, so. Which is why I'm asking.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call?
Director Dennert.
Yes.
Director Gray.
Aye.
Director O'Brien.
Yes.
Registrar Avila.
Aye.
Chair Freeman.
Yes.
That motion carries with a unanimous vote.
Now we will go to continued business, which, excuse me, I jumped around, sorry. Written communication,
Staff has none.
reports by board members. Director Allen.
Give me 1 minute. All right, we've done Oak Park, so we've done Oak Park, so I don't have to talk about that. I think what I indicated is what I would have summarized in my board member comments. I want to point out that there is some chocolate candy over there that I brought in. It's from my stepdaughter's baby shower over the weekend, and I'm making a point of that, not to point out that she had a baby shower, but I don't want anybody to get it wrong if they pick up some of the wrappers and say, "Hello, sweet baby," or "Little cute." To staff, whatever's left, you're welcome to leave for the rest of the staff and employees after tonight. So cool, that moves me on. I attended the farewell luncheon for Miguel, and I guess I missed the most moving part of it. I was a little late for it, but I just think he's such a great guy. I'm glad I was able to make it. I don't know how many times we hugged each other there, but we're losing a good person. We're losing an outstanding employee, and I don't want to minimize, I'm losing my cornhole partner. So,
Oh, that's right.
But I have to say, I wish him well, and it was great having him. So I had to point that out. And then the other thing I want to talk about, and the thing I want to talk about most, is the MLK Day of Service. You know, we went through the first year we did this after Director Dennert, and what a great suggestion of having an MLK Day of Service. I still remember it was during the pandemic, and understandably there were concerns from other board members, from staff, but we went through with it, and thanks to our great staff, we found a creative way to do it with the social distancing and having families at different locations at the different parks. And then we had 2 rainy years, but we've kept the faith on it, we kept plugging away. We kept the idea that we know we can do better and that it will be better. And you know, we hit a home run this year. And I also want to thank Director Dennert, because I know through a number of sources that he did a lot of work in terms of recruiting volunteers for the event. You know, Jill and I were at Rancho Tapo Park, and I've seen Laura provided me with the list of volunteers and with the list of employees involved, and I can tell you that on top of the people that officially were signed in, there were other people who showed up. When I did my, as I do at the beginning of the event every year, when I read the quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., there was one lady out there who was moved by it and was excited to point out, her name was Joni, I remember that she brought 6 volunteers there, and I can tell you, I didn't see Joni's name on the official list, so that right there is 6 people who weren't even on the list when I was doing the numbers. And so by my count, and this is really conservative, at all the locations put together, we had upwards of 75 people, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was well over 90 if there were other people showing up who weren't officially signed up at the locations, which far exceeds anything we've had in the past, and which is more than enough to get the work done. So I have to say that the event was a huge success, and it's a great thing. I do want to take the time, because I'm impressed with what a huge success it was. Nikki Collier has been behind this thing from the beginning through the 4 years. She's knocked herself out in the past. She's had to make adjustments because of the other factors that were involved, such as the pandemic and the restrictions, and then the rain the last couple of years. And she's done it and kept her head up. And this year she got to see the fruits of her labor and the success, and that's so awesome. Nikki was out there with us at Rancho Tapo, and she was kicking butt. I know she went to one of the other sites after that, so I didn't get to say bye to her later. So a shout out to Nikki, and likewise to Laura Ballantoni, who I know has been so much involved in this event. You guys did a great job, and you really scored. I want to mention, I obviously can't go through all the volunteers, but I do want to thank all the people who volunteered, whether you're on that list or not on that list. The Park District appreciates it, the community appreciates it. Everybody seemed to be having a good time and was smiling and just felt great about the whole thing. But I do want to mention the other employees who were involved at the various sites. Douglas Duran, Jonathan Schwartz, Wayne Nakaoka, Heather Ramirez, Jeannie Liss, Paul Friedeborn, Jennifer Santos, Eugene Molnar, Mario Delgado, Sandra Salute, Zach Miller. Thank you to all of you. I want to finish. I've got to finish with a quote from MLK as a tribute to all the volunteers, the employees, and the success of the event, and just kind of how I've seen our new school approach of always trying to do better, of always trying to do our best. And last month I quoted from that powerful, inspirational song that John Denver wrote, The Eagle and the Hawk, about how he talked about being the best we can ever be. And Martin Luther King had a similar quote once from a completely different perspective, and so I want to share that with you. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be a sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or fail. Be the best of whatever you are. Thank you.
Director Jenner?
Anyway, I most appreciate your comments as you go in, staff member by staff member, recognizing the efforts, and I appreciate that. I'm not going to repeat the names, but to everybody that he mentioned and more, we appreciate you. Martin Luther King wanted to create the beloved community, and obviously, as we know, he was against racism, but he was also against militarism and poverty, and he thought those things would lead us to a just community. When he was killed, he was not popular. In fact, if I got the numbers right, Donald Trump and Joe Biden are both more popular than Martin Luther King was when he was killed as a public figure. The reason I mention that is because he challenges us. He challenges us to keep working for that beloved community. I would ask in the coming years we mix up some of the quotes. I love his quotes, but just so we can educate the community to different parts to him. So there's many inspiring quotes that he has. It's important to be healthy, and to be healthy, our parks need to be safe. So I appreciate all the people involved in our parks being safe, including our park rangers. And to Nikki for organizing it, and the entire team, I appreciate you. So I forgot on Friday night to make sure I had enough trash grabbers at my house. But I didn't want to call Paul on the weekend. That seemed a little bit wrong. And I figured I'd just show up at the building at 7 o'clock, and knowing Paul, he'd already be here. So I showed up at 7 o'clock, and he was already at the park. The event didn't start till 9. He was already gone. So I waited a little bit. I called him at 7:44. I just checked my phone. He was already there, set up with everything ready to go. The volunteers arrived at 9. So I have no idea what time he woke up, probably like 5:30 or something, but I'm impressed. And I mentioned that story because I know for a lot of our volunteers and myself, we could walk in a few minutes before the event starts, not knowing how much time and effort the staff has to put in before an event. So I appreciate all of them. At our particular Vista del Arroyo project, I had my daughter and her friends go clean up the arroyo. Many of the volunteers organized, sanded down bridges, and then used linseed oil to make the bridges look nice and shiny again. And then Cub Scouts picked up the fallen oranges of the orange trees that many people don't realize, but the Park District orange trees right in the corner. And you could just walk up and grab some oranges, but a lot of them fall on the ground, they're rotten. So the little Cub Scouts climbed under the trees and cleaned it up super quick, and they did an awesome job. And then my sister was at Stratton Park with many other people and volunteers, so I know awesome things were happening at other projects too. And then the Fallout Riders, which is a local bike riding club, named after, I'm pretty confident of this, the Rocket 9 facility. So the Fallout Riders also cleaned up the trail too. They rode the arroyo on their bikes, and they had a trailer on their bikes so they could pull out a bunch of trash, and we appreciate them too. The Oak Park committee meeting, I was frustrated that Ed was at 5 committee items, or 5 agenda items.
It was 5.
It was 5, and I spent...
There were 6, but there were 5 that were from 1.
So 5 agenda items from somebody that I haven't spoken to before or after about those agenda items, but seeing them, I met with staff, sat down, tried to understand a variety of perspectives, prepare for the meeting, and to have those. And at one moment in the committee meeting, it was like, well, maybe we'll talk about this next time instead. Like, well, I want to talk about them right now. I put a lot of work into this to understand them. They're on the agenda. Some people might be interested in what these are, so that was frustrating. But I did hear from the committee that some of them were open to ideas, like maybe why does it need to be a Brown Acted meeting? Maybe it could be a meeting where people could share ideas. But they definitely wanted to have a voice, but the structure of it could change. I know we'll talk about that in more detail. And then I just happened to be out, and I saw a big group of kids at the corner of, by Corriganville, that dirt lot, making an impromptu BMX course out of it. And it'd be nice if there's a place for them to safely ride in the community where they're allowed to. They look like they're having fun, but they'd have a little bit more fun if there's a track for them. So maybe in the future, we'll get an update from the city on that.
Craig?
Yeah, this is the first year I've missed a day of service, and unfortunately it was because I started to get sick, and I'm still sick at this moment. And in light of that, I will save any of my report for next time when I'm better able to speak.
Director O'Brien.
Yes. I also was sick. I was basically alternating between traveling to see family and friends for the holidays and being sick. So I also missed MLK Day of Service, but he wasn't inspiring. I mean, you really think that Biden and Trump are more popular? Really?
That's what I mean by him challenging us is.
Okay, good.
I don't mean
he
more
was-
popular today. I mean when he was assassinated, America.
Okay, maybe his legend has grown. That's
Correct.
probably true. He was certainly a great speaker. You know the difference between a good speaker and a great speaker. A good speaker, people come up afterward and say, "What a great speech that was." Great speaker, the people march. And MLK was definitely a great speaker. So as I said, I was alternating between being out of town and being ill, so I don't really have much of a report. I will say that I did go to the homeless count, the Ventura County homeless count training this afternoon for the count that's taking place next Wednesday, the 24th. And I did this last year, and I found it really educational and eye-opening, and I was eager to do it again, so I'm looking forward to it. And beyond that, I just want to wish everyone a Happy New Year.
Katie, I want to clarify my comments. The reason I brought up his popularity was people don't like being challenged, and he definitely challenged us.
Yeah.
So when he
Oh,
was
yeah.
alive, he was an influential speaker and did
Yes.
many great things, but because he was challenging,
Oh yeah, that's part of, yeah.
I would like to think he became more popular because we started accepting his
Yeah.
ideas more.
Comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Definitely.
Okay, I worked at the Strathern. It was I took the afternoon shift, and I think it was really well organized, and I have to say that Wayne is the neatest painter I have ever seen. He is perfectly neat, not a drop of paint, and he was immaculate, but we didn't quite finish, and I think there are maybe 4 sections or so, and then we need some touch-up. So I'd like to suggest if anybody else is willing to kind of do a work party down there, coordinate with Jeannie, and we finish up the fence. It's the most important part. It's at the gate, right at the, maybe we started at the wrong end, I don't know. But the other thing that I thought was, that I really appreciated was the family with kids. Those parents are making good citizens, future citizens. And I wish more parents had done that, but just seeing them out there, I think made me feel really good about, and those kids were taking it seriously too. So, secondly, I went to the Police Foundation dinner Friday night, and it was not a fundraiser. It was to honor all the people that have done just incredible work for CMPD, the chaplains, the volunteers, and it was sold out. It was a very, very positive event. In the years past, and it got lost somewhere in the COVID time, we used to have an annual report, and I'd like to suggest we do that again from Strathern. And the Strathern report told all the activities and the numbers of people and the money that was raised through the wedding rentals. Anyway, I'd like to suggest that we go back to having that annual report, and that it could include the depot as well, just to get an idea of how many visitors there are and the volunteer time, and so we're all aware of what's going on in those 2 facilities. I just want to, you mentioned Jeannie was at your workstation. She was at our workstation too, so, and she was in charge, so she did a great job there at Strathern. I have a question, and At the Oak Park meeting, did you talk about the bicycles, the electric bikes on trails?
We did a little bit, yes.
I mean, Danny Sue,
She's on the meeting here. Yeah.
or is there any follow-up necessary
Yeah,
for that?
well, I follow up from that meeting, that'll be on your next agenda,
Okay.
reporting out of
Good.
the Oak Park committee. Yeah.
And I think that was all. I hope you all had a great holiday. And Happy New Year. I'm sorry you got sick. And I'm sorry you're sick, Josh. But get well. Anyway, with that, we'll go to the general manager's report.
Thank you, Chair and Board. The Oak Park Committee, we've talked about, I was going to dive into that a little bit, but it will be, the follow-up from their meeting will be formally on your agenda at your next meeting. I too want to thank the staff for all of the effort for MLK Day. We got a lot of people involved in that on what is a Park District holiday, and we've got a lot of people working that day in support of our community and the message there. Again, Zach and I are going to meet with the Madison County HOA as neighbors for our new open space up there. They were interested in learning about it. Mental health, I believe we rescheduled that meeting. I just want to, with Josh and Ed, did we get that rescheduled?
Yeah, I think we haven't gotten it rescheduled, but I'm fine with rescheduling it, obviously.
We do have the active shooter training scheduled for staff, as Director O'Brien was interested in, I think Josh as well. So that's scheduled. We are going to record it. So we've gotten permission from the police department to record the active shooter training, then we'll have a recording of it that we can share with staff all year long. So that was Richard recommended that. The finance position, Miguel's old position, I believe we have final interviews next week. We're hoping to have somebody in that position or at least selected for it the next couple of weeks. So that's nice. We did do our December financials. That's important because it's our midway point through the fiscal year, and everything is in line and looking financially stable in accordance with our plan. Josh, you had recommended we meet with that group for the jobs. I think they were called SVS, to see if we had any employment opportunities. These are developmentally disabled people. There's a program where they try to find gainful employment for those types of folks. We did meet with them. Zach and I were looking at if we can make that work for them, Josh. So we did do that. The pool construction has been delayed until the end of the month, primarily because of rain and the inability to pour concrete and the timing of pouring concrete out there. So that's Wayne and I attended a CARB seminar. I know this is Elaine's been on this, California Air Resources Board, regarding the conversion of fleets from combustion engines to electric. So I just want to let you know that Wayne and I and the staff are keeping up on changes in the law.
Was it beneficial?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we haven't followed up on it yet, but they provide a lot of detailed information. So we're on top of that issue. The Council on Aging is having their 50th anniversary. I believe they're appointed by the city. That's on January 31st at 2. I think you guys got invitations for that quite a while ago. They did ask me to speak at that, just kind of go over our history with the seniors and programming and what we do for the senior community. So I will be doing that. I was also asked to speak at the Republican Women. They're interested in learning about the Arroyo Cini, both the master plan and progress on the bike path on the Arroyo Cini, so I'll be doing that. And then finally, the Elks and Rotary, I think I mentioned this before, have teamed up to have us a park appreciation lunch for Park District employees. So that is on January 25th from 11 to 1 at the Elks facility. So that was very nice of them to recognize our staff. Upcoming board meetings, February 7th. We are looking at bringing back the Activity Center Phase 3 presentation. We did that with you individually, but we'll be looking for approval to move into official detailed construction drawings and such. We've got an OPEB actuarial report. That's an annual thing that we report to you guys. That's our other post-employment benefits. ASC fees, you guys have asked that to come to you earlier rather than later, so I think Zach has that tentatively scheduled for the 7th. The kickoff of the engineer's assessment report, just getting direction to go ahead and move forward with just the report. The Oak Park committee structure, and also the fate of the committee, and then the follow-up from the Oak Park committee meeting will be on your February 7th meeting. We don't have much scheduled for the 21st right now, which will be your next meeting. but that'll probably grow as we go.
Are there any of those items that can go to the 21st?
I will
I'm
look.
doing that in my head,
Yeah.
and that's another midnight meeting.
I will look at that. That's a good point. If we don't end up with anything there, I'll balance those two meetings out. So that, we have no committee meetings other than Historical Society, and that concludes my report.
Just wanted to remind you, Dan, I will be missing the February 7th meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Out of town.
Another reason that.
You definitely want to move something.
With that, Chair, we've got two closed session items. One is listed on the special meeting agenda and one is listed on the regular meeting agenda. I'm going to have Brian go ahead and announce them for both, and then we need to take open public comment for those two items, and then we can go into closed session. I do not anticipate any reportable action, so we can adjourn out of the closed session and not come back to open sessions.
Okay, so for the regular meeting, we have 4 items. Item A is closed session pursuant to Government Code 54957.6, conference with labor negotiator. The agency negotiator is the district manager and district administration. The employee organization is the Middle Management Association. Items B through D are the same, closed session pursuant to Government Code section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiator. The only difference is the employee organization. For B, the employee organization is the Employees Association. For C, the employee organization is the Maintenance and Grounds Association. And for D, the employee organization is the Unrepresented Employees. For our special meeting, the closed session item is closed session pursuant to Government Code section 54957, public employee appointment, title District Legal Counsel.
Thank you. We will go into closed session.
Wait, public comment?
Yes.
Yeah, we need to ask about public comment.
Public comment.
Oh, excuse me. Are there any public comment on any of the closed session items? There is none in the public here. Is anyone on Zoom? None on Zoom. I'll close the public comment.
Take a quick back.